Well, good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
It's 8 o'clock,
Touches.
so we'll get started here. Welcome to this week's presentation. We've got two great topics. Ben Plunkett's going to talk to us about forest ecosystems. Since we're sitting in the middle of the forest, that's a good topic. We'll take a break, and then Donna Work is going to be here, and she's going to talk to us about the red cockaded woodpecker and the efforts to protect and grow that population. And then we'll send you out into the forest with Donna. And if you hold your mouth just right in a squat, you might even see one. They did last year. We were able to capture one. So if you brought your binoculars or cameras, that's a good place to take one. And so first off, any questions, comments, good news, bad news, weird news, as I call it?
Weird news?
Yeah.
There's a lot of that.
Yeah, there's a lot of that. So we don't go there, but good news, bad news, no? I will give you personal experience. I was telling Roxanne about this. Last week, at the chapter meeting, we had a woman that came out from the Katy Prairie chapter out there and did a whole segment on mothing and looking for insects in the dark, which was very inspiring. She saw the very next morning on my run, what did I run across? But a polyphemus moth about this big.
Oh.
And there I got a picture of it. I stopped my run, got the camera and got a picture and cropped it and submitted it to INET. So that was, the next time I ran, Thursday, I was running along, I got through running, walking back to my house, and what did I see for the first time ever? Probably, what did I see? It's been there, but what did I see? A bluebird. So this class does change the way you see the world. It changed my way. So I hope it does yours.
So if you rub his stomach when we are out the trail.
I'll see the woodpecker.
I'm not feeling, but I'll follow you anyway. So, all right. Quick safety minute. Always start with one of those. We're going to be sending you out into the woods, and Don's going to have you looking up the whole time. So my safety minute for you is make sure you look down also and don't trip on anything. You will find yourself wandering around like this, trying to find them because they're not easy to spot. It's there. And she'll give you all the signs for it. So, yeah, look down occasionally. Make sure there's not a limb or a snake. Thank you, a snake that's there. So remember that. Also, we heard a lot about iNaturalist in the chapter meeting for those of you that were able to go. Our request is if you are an iNaturalist user or have a handle or would like to add it,
Put it up
put it up
here.
on the board.
Yeah.
And then you can follow, you can see who's posted, begin to develop a little community within your income.
Yeah, we noticed in the citizen scientist presentation that some of you had put that in the chat. So go ahead and put your handle up here so we can start that community effort of INET and getting people involved with that.
All right. A few other quick notes, and then we'll have a minute of opportunity. Let's hear it. Next class is next Saturday. It is at Spring Creek Greenway Nature Center.
Which is Riley Bustle.
Yeah. It's just down the road, if you know where, what is it, was Lewis Johnston Park. I think they renamed it.
Is the address in our
Yes.
schedule?
Yes, it should be.
It
at
is,
the end
and
of the
Virginia will be sending out a Google map.
So sorry. So,
Thank you.
Recommend GPS.
yeah, GPS it.
I always,
It's a great place to plan to come a little early or stay a little late because they have an amazing exhibit of live plants and animals in the nature center itself, and some snakes and all kinds of things to look at. It's a very cool nature center. It's there. Next chapter meeting is on the 8th of April. Ryan Beebe, who is a long-term chapter member, that's here. had an opportunity, he inherited this huge herbarium. He ended up with it in Pennsylvania. He went up, got it, brought it back, and has donated it to Mercy. It's my understanding. That's gonna be fuzzy on that to me. But he's gonna present that whole story about how he got to what he got, what it looks like. It's pretty cool to bring that kind of thing down here. Anybody working on projects you want to share anything with? No? Just checking it. The other questions,
They're gonna have a surprise.
they're surprising us volunteers. Any other questions? No? All right, so Karen, minute of opportunity. Yeah.
All right.
Let me get her slide up.
Will be try to stick to my minute. Good morning. I'm Karen Zent. I'm a volunteer on the training committee too, and I didn't put it on my slide. Last August, I got a new hip. So leading up to it, and since then, I've been pretty limited in my mobility. And that's what I really wanted to stress. There are opportunities to meet you where you are. You don't have to clear trails and plant pollinator gardens. As great as that sounds. So in addition to the committee, I do Cocoa Rock, which I think some of you have also are volunteering for. And did they talk about that at Citizen Science?
Yes.
Yes. So I put the website, I'm happy to talk and answer questions if you have any. And I put where to find it in the VMS. And don't forget to log your hours is my lesson learned because I lost a bunch. I thought I had 90 days last year. You have 30 days. And Cocoa Raw is about 30 minutes a week. And I lost quite a few hours, which hurt me, but it also hurts the chapter. They don't get the funding for it. Editing and transcribing. This was a virtual volunteer. I'm so nervous. I haven't been in front of a group in years. I do everything online now.
You're doing great.
Yes. Editing and transcribing. I'm a writer. That's what I do. I sit quietly all day at my desk, and it's a bad hip. This came through the virtual volunteer fair, which Virginia is going to talk about more in depth. I won't steal that thunder, but I actually found it through Carolina. She was volunteering, talking, somebody needed help. She let me know. So my takeaway, I should call these takeaways, is to let others know what you're looking for and what your limitations are. And then lastly, community outreach. This is my favorite. I like to, despite the fact that I don't like to talk in front of groups, I like to talk in booths one-on-one. And I really got the elevator pitch down, what we do, who we are. You can spit it out fast, and when you spend, 5 hours doing it, it's also a great way to get hours. As you get the hours traveling to pick up the materials in the back room, setting up and being there. I think I got 8 hours for one Saturday. Those are on the public outreach on the calendar. They go under public outreach. And my lesson learned there is if it looks full, reach it out. They normally put 2 volunteer slots, but they will welcome more. So if you see something you want to do, just give them a call, send an email to the outreach coordinator, and you can add yourself. I'm happy to talk one-on-one.
Thank you, Karen.
Oh, good. Hi, good morning, everybody. I wanted to say, if you don't see the woodpecker today, I do private tours for $9.99, and
I'm willing to go to more links to show you the woodpecker than Donna is. I'll like hit the tree and stuff. I'm Ben Plunkett. I'm the district forester. I'm out of the Huntsville office. Monday will be my 15-year anniversary with the Forest Service. I've been doing it quite a while.
Congratulations.
I started in this office in March of 2011, and I was here until 2016. I relocated to Jasper and was in Jasper for about 5 years, and then I've been in Huntsville for about 5 years. So I have temporarily overseen this office many times over the years, and then now I operate the office out of Huntsville. So I'm the district forester for Huntsville, Cleveland, and Conroe. And today we'll go over, I titled it Forest Ecology. There's not a lot of ecology on it. There's a lot of history, a lot about the forest ecosystem, what we used to have, what we currently have, and how we manage forests as a whole, and a lot of history of the Forest Service as well. This is one of my, a topic that I enjoy doing. So I was, glad to be here today. I wanted to start with this. Texas is very diverse. We have, and you could break it down even more than that, but we have a lot of different ecosystems. But we're going to focus mostly on that eastern side of the purple. And when you look at that ecosystem really goes from here all the way to the Atlantic Ocean. I mean, it covers all of the Gulf states. It goes up to the north, and the piney woods even catch part of Kentucky and Tennessee and some others. So we're going to focus on Texas, but a lot of this stuff, especially in the early parts of history, really applies to everything in the southeastern United States. And also, I've been so busy lately, I haven't had much of a chance to review this. Y'all are going to catch me like looking up to remind myself. But to tell any story, you've got to begin at the beginning of it. And so we're going to start with the history of that ecosystem. And before I do that, I had a note that I wanted to say is hindsight is 2020. It's very easy for me to stand up here, hundreds of years later after some of these decisions were made and question them. And I want to fully acknowledge that. And I have, that some of the decisions that led to the destruction of some of these natural ecosystems built the world that we have today, built a great country. So I have to acknowledge that. We didn't necessarily do everything right as humans, and we didn't know it at the time. I mean, we didn't have the information that we have now. So I have to acknowledge that. So when European settlement first came to the United States, or even Native Americans that lived here in the piney woods, they experienced something that looks like this. Historical records show that we had vast mature forests that you could drive a wagon through. Just very, very representative of that. You could walk. There's very minimal underbrush, just entirely different. And we don't have that today. When you look, we have parts of that on the Jones and places. There's some on the National Forest. There's some private lands that have that. But for the most part, a lot of our ecosystem doesn't look like this. Can anybody tell me what do you see now when you drive down the road, like compared to what you're looking at right here? What's the difference that you see in our forest today?
We can't see through it.
You can't see through it. Yopon, right? That big difference in what we've got now. So, and why did it look like this? Was wildfire. And so prior to the settlement and the development of the United States, a lightning bolt could strike the ground, it could start a fire, and then that fire would burn unchecked until it hit the nearest river, natural or whatever natural barrier that there was to stop it. We didn't have a Texas Forest Service to come put the fire out. We didn't have a local fire department to put the fire out. We didn't have a road system to stop it. It was just exclusively whatever nature wanted to do. And so this area historically burned every 2 to 3 years. So and up to 7. There's all intervals, right? So sometimes it would burn annually. Sometimes it might be 7 years, but the average was somewhere around every 2 to 3 years, our ecosystem would experience periodic fire. And I use southern pine, so here's 2 to 3 years, up to 7. Every ecosystem has a fire return interval. Here it's very common. A lot of grasslands, it's very common, annual. And if you get into like the chaparral in California, for example, I think it's like 100-year return interval. And we'll talk about some of that later, but But every ecosystem has some type of relationship with fire, just because it's a natural occurrence from lightning. And then I mentioned, you'll see the term succession right there. That's something that we'll talk about pretty extensively later in the day. And there, and now some of the causes. So fire's the big one. Of Smokey Bear, and I've had this several times in this presentation. It was one of the most effective marketing campaigns in history, with the removal of fire from an ecosystem. I mean, we have a giant poster right back there, But there's other things that we've done as a species. So we remove fire from an ecosystem. We've also altered hydrology. We put concrete in places that it didn't belong. We put roadways in places that they weren't historically there. We've done just a lot of things, storm walls, dams, lakes, agriculture, so many things that altered the natural landscape. And so on here, this is really the timeline of when we started seeing a change. So in 1826, or 1825, sorry, we had the first sawmill that was built in the state of Texas. So that was in San Augustine, Texas, and that was actually a mule or horse-pulled mill. And then in 1830, we had the first steam-powered mill built. It was called the Harrisburg Mill. So it's built down in the Houston area, and actually logs were floated down Buffalo Bayou to feed the mill. And that same mill was burned down by the Mexican Army during the Texas Revolution in 1836. So that's kind of the beginning of forestry. So prior to that moment, everything that we took. So if you came and you settled somewhere in Texas or somewhere in the piney woods, you cut down what you needed to build your house, to build your barn, to build a fence or railings or whatever you needed. But we weren't really doing anything for commercial purposes. That 1825 to especially that 1830 mill, where we had a little bit more production with steam power, was kind of the first commercialization of the lumber industry in Texas. Now, it wasn't commercial like what we see today, where we can process thousands of trees in a day, but that was the very beginning of it. And then when you look at that post-Civil War era, 1865 to the early 1900s, that's when we really start to see that part of that change. So some of this natural ecosystem that looks like this, these trees are disappearing, and that's when they started. So now, as a country, we've got a goal to bring a railroad from the Pacific to the Atlantic, and we accomplished that goal, and we're able to move wood across. Well, the Southeast has been the wood basket of the United States for building that infrastructure since we moved here to settle. And so now we've developed, a railroad system where we can cut wood here and we can move it hundreds or thousands of miles away. And so that was that early divide. So right here in that time, that's when we really started seeing the commercialization. And so now in the early 1900s, this is really the critical time, and I would say the ultimate demise of that ecosystem, that big mature timber, grassy understory, and what led to what we have today. So in the early 1900s, we now have a vast a railroad network in the United States. We can move timber from coast to coast. And if you look at this stat right here, you don't have to know what this means. So about a board foot is basically 1 foot by 1 foot of a square foot of a board. So understand the concept of this. You don't have to remember exactly what a board foot is, but in the year 1907 alone, so that's the greatest lumber production in the history of the state of Texas, we produced 2.5 billion board feet of lumber. And in the entire duration of World War II, so late 1941 through 1945, which we're taught growing up is the peak industrialization of the United States. Our factories are absolutely roaring. We're supporting this massive war effort in Europe and on all these little islands in the Pacific and across the entire world. And we've never produced more for the world than in that moment. Our lumber production was only 1.4 billion board feet. So it's almost double. Just in 1907 alone, we cut down more trees than what we did in the entire duration of World War II, where we were an industrial giant in the world. And that speaks, of really how dire the situation was for a forested ecosystem. Now, like I said, the population at this point in time in the early 1900s is rapidly growing in the United States. And so we have to remember that's the hindsight, right? we have this, this still young country that's really, picking up and moving and starting to advance. And so like these are decisions that, they had to be made, but that just really puts it in perspective for you of how much wood we cut down in the early 1900s. And so we also experienced a severe rise in wildfires at this time. And I've got two quotes right here that I put up there. And I particularly love the second one. But so this is W.G. Jones. He was the father of forestry in the state of Texas. He lobbied for the creation of the Texas Forestry Association, who then lobbied for the creation of us as an agency. So he really pushed. The forest here is named after him. As it says, it's rare now to find a good body of pine standing along the railroad. The best must be sought 10 and 15 miles back. The hope of the forest is that the state or United States government will intervene and pass laws limiting the cut to certain sizes, also employing a forestry patrol to guard against fires and waste. So that was in the late 1800s, I think 1897, 1898, where W.G. Jones has experienced that. So he mentions along the railroads, 15, 20 miles. So we've already cut everything along our railroad system at that point. This one was, I believe, early 1900s. I think it was around 1910, 1911. And this was the future state forester of the Texas Forest Service, Eric Seeke. And I love this quote because it really paints the picture. Within 7 years, the commercial timber supply in Texas will be largely exhausted. Today, there are over 4.5 million acres of cut over land, 4.5 million acres of decimated cut over land, either so destitute of forest growth that they will not reforest at all, or with an insufficient amount of secondary growth to produce a well-stocked stand of timber. So we have at this point 4.5 million acres of land that's essentially barren wasteland. I've got some pictures of it right here, next slide. So this was 1924, and I have a photo. I know exactly where this spot is. I took a picture 100 years later of exactly that spot. So we'll look at that in a bit. A lot different, but this is very representative of what Texas forest looked like in the 1920s and even earlier. So I would say the 1920s were when we really started getting a grip on handling this situation. And it was pretty dire up until then, but basically a barren wasteland stump field across the southeast. And so, here's some examples of impacts to the ecosystem. Is that you look at longleaf. Longleaf is not historically prevalent in this area. We probably had some, but particularly when you get a little east of here, very prevalent. And it was one of the most common trees, just 50 miles east of here. And all the way to the Atlantic, very, very common species. Now we only have 3% of that original population that remains. And there's a few things that contribute to it. One of that is the commercialization of forestry. So once we cut down everything, we had to figure out how to put it back. That led to some plantation forestry type stuff. And longleaf is a little harder to establish than it is loblolly pine. Loblolly grows faster. So there's a lot of reasons, but that's a big one. And so, and longleaf, the textbook longleaf ecosystem comes with that savanna type, mature trees, grassy understory, frequently burned. Longleaf has evolved with fire to where it can even survive it as a baby. So when I plant longleaf, I burn it within the first year of putting it in the ground. Pretty much every other species that you plant, you're going to wait at least 7 years, most of the time 15 to 18 years before you're able to implement any kind of fire on it. Longleaf, after it establishes a little bit of a root system, it has a protective barrier where you need to burn it in those early phases. So very, very different. And it goes with the change of wildfire in the area. And the reason that it's gone, it's the same stuff we've talked about: lack of wildfire, altered hydrology, roadways, and then the increased growth rates of pine. So when in the 1920s, the same guys that that led to this destruction, the timber barons that were using this wood and exploiting the land. It's a lot easier for that to come back with a species that grows faster and is going to make them more money sooner. So a lot of reasons. And what does it impact? Wildlife of all types, but a lot of them have adapted to it. We still have an abundance of wildlife in the state of Texas. A lot of them lived in that historic ecosystem. A lot of them live in our ecosystem today. We do have one species here, red cockaded woodpecker, that does not thrive in our ecosystem today. And that's one of the reasons that it's an endangered species, is because it needs that mature pine savanna with a grassy understory. So it's impacted some, which actually was just delisted from the endangered list, which is good, but we still have a significant threat to it. And so I remember I was young. I was probably in my early 20s. I just started. So I started here. I worked here all through college, got my degree, and got promoted. And I think it was not long after I got promoted. So I was probably 22, and I did a presentation, and I had to do a talk on woodpeckers, and you're nervous, and I'm like straight out, you're very nervous, and somebody put me on the spot, and I had to cover like management of the Jones and whatever. And he asked me that question on top. It's just a bird. Why does it matter? He's pretty irritated by it. Like, oh, his tax dollars are going towards preserving the bird. And I don't remember how I answered that question. I remember the question. I always get it just shocked me. I'm like, man, I'm just trying to do a talk. But I probably didn't answer very good. But here, when I think about it objectively, this would be my answer now to that question. And so in the 1970s, that's a dodo bird right there. In the 1970s, it was. Has anybody seen this example before? No, y'all know where I'm good. Sometimes you get groups that have. So in the 1970s, it was hypothesized that we noticed that the Calvaria tree. So this is on the island of Mauritius, off the coast of Madagascar. The Calvaria tree is no longer germinating like it once did, if germinating at all. And so the dodo bird's extinction was hypothesized to be the direct contributor to that. So the gizzard of the dodo bird and an enzyme within it was hypothesized to have the ability and the only ability to break down the seed coat on the Calvaria tree to allow it to germinate. And that was a very popular hypothesis. It's never been disproven. Now there's some thoughts that it's, there might be some other things that contribute to it. But if you think about that, the fact that the extinction of one species, in this case, the dodo bird, could directly lead to the extinction of another species is absolutely terrifying. And it's absolutely terrifying for us as a species, because where do we fall on that chain of dominoes?
That's right.
So if we have the longleaf ecosystem and this historic pine ecosystem that goes extinct, and now we already have endangered red cockaded woodpecker. Well, who's to say that doesn't eat an insect or benefit an insect that pollinates something that filters? So I don't know. We don't know where that chain of events goes on. So and it's terrifying to realize that you don't have any control over that. But I think about that all the time. It's just the extinction of one species directly leading to the extinction of another is absolutely terrifying for every species, and particularly for us as humans. And we don't know what will happen. Maybe nothing. I don't know. We'll find out someday. But so to put us back on track, we've got, this is the same quote from earlier. So we're back in the early 1920s. Times are desperate, right? We've got 4.5 million acres of cut over land. If it was completely flat, there was no curvature of the earth, then you would be able to see from here to the Atlantic Ocean. It's just completely desolate. And now this is where I plug me in, right? The savior's waiting in the wings. So and I do one thing that I'm very proud of. I love the history of Texas forestry and the history of the Forest Service. And when I look at it, Texas Forest Service has a lot of firsts. And I think that we had a very direct impact, and it was intentional. W.G. Jones pushed for our founding to fix some of these problems. And I'm proud of our agency for our response to it and our ability to do that. So William Goodrich Jones, 1914, lobbied the legislature to create us in 1915. And we went to work. And I've always thought this was funny. So originally, we were the forestry department at Texas A&M. So I work for Texas A&M University. I'm in extension. of the university. I teach a lot of classes for the university. That's the bad part about being in Huntsville. Is you're the closest, Forester to the university. So I'm there all the time, or they're coming to me. But we're part of the. Basically, we were professors at that point. And this is the part that I find hilarious is in 1915, we were put under a university system to be free of political interference. And I don't know. Hey, Texas A&M is a pretty big player in the political game in the state of Texas now, owning the lead wildfire agency for the state of Texas and Texas Division of Emergency Management that controls all emergency response. It's a pretty different scene, but and this was always cool. So we basically started out, we had 6 people, and they were just 6 guys that rode the timberlands of East Texas, and they had 2 missions, right? So their first one, exact words, I think, was take such action deemed necessary to prevent, I'll put it right there, prevent and extinguish wildfires. That was their mandate by the legislature to do that. But they also spent a significant amount of time educating landowners. So they would ride from farm to farm, community to community, and they're talking to people and they're educating them and they're trying to help solve some of this problem. And here were our historical objectives. So assist private landowners in forest management practices, protect forest lands against wildfires, insects, and diseases, provide public education in forestry, assist industry in wood product development and improvement. We've existed for 110 years now, and that really hasn't changed. Our wording has changed drastically, but when you look at the core of what that wording means, is still our mandate 110 years later is still basically the same. And so just some notable accomplishments in Texas forestry. 1926 was a big year for Texas forestry. So in that year, we established the first nursery in the state of Texas. And that year, 65 acres of longleaf pine were planted, and this is believed to be the first commercial planting of timber in the history of the United States. So it had never been done before. At least there's no record. This is the first recorded record of anything in the United States of a large scale tree planting. And then it continues in 1926. So as an agency that year, the first slash pine plantation or the first plantation in general for forestry was planted. It was on the Seakey State Forest in Kirbyville. That was where I was. So when I left here, I went to the Seakey State Forest. And the first plantation was planted there in Kirbyville. And that plantation is what proved that you could both sustainably and commercially grow timber for a profit. Which that changed forestry. And you can argue it changed it in a negative way too. But it did give us the ability. So now that we proved that you could plant trees and later cut them down and make money, that allowed some investment in the game, right? So people generally don't like to do things that they lose money on, even if it's for the greater good. But when the same guys that cut all the timber down and caused some of this problem can now replant it and make some money off of it, it helped, to reforest. So it's a good and bad. We resulted in plantation. We also were able to get more trees in the ground. In 1926, this is just a side note, the first fire tower in the state of Texas was established, and it's there in Kirbyville. Kirbyville was kind of the historical grounds for the Forest Service. And we used those to spot fire. So we had towers all over the place, and they would triangulate. So we would have somebody up with a sextant. They would see a smoke column. They would look at it. They would radio to another tower, and they would get different azimuths to it, and then we could send somebody to that exact coordinate. But fire towers really especially after World War II. Once aircraft became very available, we don't use them. So now I can do it with satellite imagery. So I have the ability to go in and look at hot spots. Now a lot of your small fires don't pick up, but especially something larger, I can see a hot spot from a satellite on the earth. But I fly planes here if we have a dry lightning storm that comes through, or it's just very dry and we're having a lot of fires, especially when it's really windy. Then I'll put planes in the air and we'll have them fly a grid pattern looking for smoke still. So we still have that same thing. And so in 1929, that nursery expanded. And it expanded pretty drastically. And at that same year, we started a nursery here. on the Jones State Forest. And so it had the capacity to produce 1 million trees annually. And so that really helps to solve that problem. The Jones has a pretty cool history too. It has a lot of did a lot of ornamental stuff. So some of the other forests were like your production forestry type, and the Jones now did have a production forestry nursery, but it did a lot of ornamental experimentation type stuff here. And so we had many nurseries over the years. So I listed the Jones. We had Indian Mound, Fastral, Magnolia Springs, Jacksonville. I mean, we had them all over the place. And for a long time, we were the only place that you could buy seedlings from in the state of Texas. And we disbanded in 2008. There was pressure from private vendors. We now had a lot of private nursery companies that offered seedlings, and they could meet the demand of of landowners and of commercial industry to produce those. So yes, sir.
You had a question?
Oh, sure.
No, two of them. First one was with the aircraft and the fire towers. I still think that's more of a downgrade than it is the evolution due to fire towers being more environmentally friendly than aircraft systems.
Yeah.
Now, as far as the TSF nurseries and disbanding, do y'all ever considering like reforming another group with the nurseries and
I don't think so. There's a lot of politics involved in it. And so the private forestry industry has really dictated a lot of what we can do as an agency now, and that the power in I guess up to the legislative level. So for example, I used to do prescribed burning on private land. I used to do dozer work on private land, and we used to plant trees on private land. So we did it all. So you would come to the Forest Service. You would plant you would buy the trees from me. I would plant them for you. I would burn them for you, etc. And we do very little of that now, and that's due to private industry pressure. I don't see it getting back.
so there would have to be essentially political changes in order for that to.
Yeah, and I think and there would have to be a need. So there's no need right now. Is the private nursery capability they have the ability to produce more than what the current demand is. That's part of the thing. So if there was ever more of a demand, that's where the Forest Service always fit in. Is we fit in to fit the demand. So if there were ever more of a demand than private industry could do, then we would immediately get back into it. So we still do some. So we do all the research. We do all the progeny tests. So we're part of the Western Gulf Tree Improvement Program. And we do we do some crossbreeding, we do seed collection, and then we provide seed sources to the private nursery. So we still have that part of it, but we could very easily get back into the game. There's just no demand for it. If there were ever a demand, like if both nurseries were destroyed, there's really two that are going to feed East Texas. Both of those were destroyed by hurricanes or tornadoes or whatever. We would immediately get back into the game. But I don't see that. They would have to both go down or something, or the demand would have to drastically increase. And the demand is only going down currently. And so here's just some examples of the state forest. So we founded our state forest for research and demonstration purposes. This one has expanded well beyond that now. This is a lot more of a park. But if you look at our other state forests, we still do active research. We still do active demonstration. This one, we do very little traditional forestry or forest management now. Most of it is red cockaded woodpecker management, and then public perception management. I get a phone call complaining, I respond to make that person happy. And so we did, here's just an example of some of the studies that we did, early on in the 20s and 30s. Timber growth and harvesting, identification of different fungi, so brown spot needle blight, prescribed burning research, prolonging the wood life of pine and hardwoods by creosoting. So treating lumber, that came from us early on. Fire effects on tree growth, bamboo study, the bamboo's still there today. I can take you right to it. That one, never gotten rid of it. And then soil sterilization by chemicals. And this is just, I mean, just a few, I mean, there's, that the list is miles long. And if you go, especially if you go to the Siki, I mean, there's old plots out there. You'll stumble across pins and stakes and everything, all through. And it's stuff. Some of them I've been able to go back through historical records and find. Some of them are obvious, like the bamboo. Others you have no idea what it was, because our record keeping wasn't great back then. And in the 1930s, A&M was responsible for, I think, about 18 CCC camps that we operated. And they did fence building, a lot of tree planting. So they planted thousands of acres of pine, both on our property, on public property, and they did some private reforestation efforts as well. And this was a big one too, is in 1938, we established the first forestry workshop for vocational agriculture teachers. So this was an extension of getting early education in forestry and natural resource management into the grade school level. Yes, sir.
For those of us much younger than me, who does remember about learning about the CCC, that was Civilian Conservation Corps. It was a government-funded Depression-era work project that went around and built all kinds of things in dams and state forests, park facilities, and you name it, they did.
Yeah.
And it was funded by the government.
Yep.
That's part of the New Deal. Yeah.
Yeah, and so it was just a massive, government-funded workforce. So we hosted their camps and we directed their activities. So now, and we were responsible for, I think, 18 of them, but it was all over. And if you go, we had a CCC camp here. I don't remember where it was. I can take you right to the ones on the Siki. We had two different camp locations on it. This forest has changed so much just because, I mean, we're entirely developed around it, so it's managed so differently. It's not near as natural as what our other forests are. Yes, sir.
All right, so I saw a slide earlier that the forest depletion where it was millions of trees burned or lost. Did that in a way, while it was almost a little over a decade prior, did that also kind of encourage the CCC camp idea?
I think the Great Depression really led to the CCC idea of just part of how to rebuild the economy, get people back to work. Now I think that was a heavy focus on things, projects that they could do, but I don't think it influenced the creation of the CCC.
Yeah. So I think the CCC, what they also did is so young men would go into it, and the agreement was, the way I understood it, is they would supply room and board, and their pay went straight back to the families because it was the families who couldn't afford food, everything, depression. So it was really a way to get all those projects done and make sure the families have contact.
Yep.
It was a trade.
Yep.
What did it stand for again?
Civilian Conservation Corps.
Huntsville State Park is a really great resource for learning more about that. I used to work there, and so there's a big mural on the wall, and they have a lot of educational resources about the CCC if anybody wants to dig into that research.
Copy that.
And also they have some buildings on site that were built by them, and so they're only allowed to build if those are in repair, they have to go through a whole process to get them repaired. You can't just go put a board up. It has to be a committee has to approve the repairs.
Yeah, we have a few. We had our Lufkin compound, which we tore down. It got eminent with the city eminent domain, the state, basically somehow. I don't know how it works, but it was all CCC stuff. So the Forest Service still has a lot of CCC buildings up. But so and just a little more on Texas forest history is. So in 1944, we started more nurseries. Magnolia Springs is still active today. So that's our only nursery. Now it is we converted it from a nursery to a seed orchard. So it used to be a nursery. So this is where we do all of our genetic testing, progeny tests, seed collection, and then we share all of our research with all of the seedling providers in the Western Gulf that then can provide these seed sources out. So we're a big part of that still. And then following the creation of these two nurseries, there's also some private stuff, and so there's really not that neat. So 1959 was the largest year of production for our seedlings, and it has been in steady decline ever since. So basically, we had a problem in the early 1900s. We built up as fast as we could to address the problem, and then within about 50 years of that problem, we had solved it to an extent to where we didn't need that rapid response. And so, and I mentioned this earlier, some of the results of the early days of our creation and our reaction to it, I think pretty drastically changed, the ecosystems in a positive way, at least a lot better. It wasn't perfect, but it was probably the best solution that we could have had. And so this is 100 years later, and that picture is old. I think we probably have 100 more employees than now. So we went from 6 people in 100 years to about 600 that we have, and we have offices statewide now. So we historically were officed entirely in East Texas. Now we're entirely statewide. And so here's our mission 100 years later. A few things added: protection, not just wildfire, now all hazard emergencies. I'm an emergency response official. There's counties that when they have issues, they call me to run emergency response for the whole county. So I'm a forestry and fire guy, and now I have to deal with ambulances, rescue boats, and all that. Not my thing, but I have to figure it out. And our all hazard emergency role has changed drastically. I have to work like 49 days for the World Cup. For disaster planning, in the event. So we have a lot of weird roles like that. We're kind of a catch-all for the state. We're the only workforce that has emergency response background, so we get kind of stuck with that. But same thing, accurate science-based information, building the capacity of others. So 30% of our budget is pass through. And so actually more, we had a historic funding this year. So we do grants to volunteer fire departments where we award them personal protective equipment, engines, all kinds of fire apparatus, so they can get millions of dollars through us. And we didn't have enough funding for years to do it. So we had a massive backlog, and the state made a decision this year above us. So at the legislative level, you fund our entire backlog, and I think it was like $300 million or something that we were able to award. And so now we have no backlog, and I believe they gave us enough money to fill our annual request. So if there's a volunteer fire department, any kind of emergency response entity, they can come to us, apply. It's pretty easy, and they can get all of the equipment. And there's some of it we pay for outright. Some of it is, the county pays for half, we pay for half, but we have a lot of money for building local communities for emergency response. And then the same, provide statewide forest and woodland economic development. So that's the same spot, 100 years later, of what that looks like. So that's a 1924 photo on the left. And on the right is a 2024 photo of the Seekie State Forest. And so the only real difference is I took this picture going, I was standing roughly the same spot. I took the picture a little bit angled to the right compared to where that was. So that you can see that road right there, that road, you can't see on the screen, but it's more like right here on that. I just didn't want to get the road in the picture on that, but very drastic difference that we have in just 100 years.
What type of pine are those? The loblolly?
What's that?
What type of pine?
That is actually, so there's a mix. There's slash and longleaf in that. So we underplanted, you can see there's one little longleaf seedling coming up. And so that's an example. So we burn that on a 2-year rotation. That has just all a high diversity of grasses in it. So we have little blue stem, big blue stem, yellow Indian grass, pretty much all of the big four of the Great Plains that you can find in there. And it's very rare. It's very rare to have, those grasses in, but we interplanted longleaf pine. So these were planted between in about 1933 to 1936. So these were CCC planted trees. Most of them were slash pine. But we do have some natural longleaf that popped up, and then we interplanted longleaf. So eventually when the slash died, then the longleaf will succeed. So with that, I mentioned you can start burning longleaf as soon as you put it in the ground. That's a good example of it. So yeah, just but every 2 years, and you still see the seedling there. Slash, a little more of a history, was also going to be the savior of the South. It ended up being loblolly, but there's a lot of slash pine. There's a lot of slash pine on this forest as well. Industry, it grows a little naturally straighter, and it grows pretty quick, and it's a little more resistant to fire. And so a lot of the forest industry started planting slash heavily. And then we found out that it was extremely susceptible to a fungus called fusiform rust. And it hits it on the main trunk. And so when you have a fungal infection on the main trunk, it creates a canker and a weak point, and it would basically snap off all of these trees. So we had hundreds of acres of slash pine that were susceptible to a fungus that causes it to break itself in half. And it also was severely susceptible to root rot. So slash was no longer the same. But that was part of when slash would save the South, was during that time. Sure.
About the longleaf, you said it does better when there's occasional fires. What exactly happens to the plant that it benefits so much from the fire?
So two things. It doesn't do well with grass competition. So you remove that grass competition, and so longleaf, because it has long needles, when you burn it, those needles will actually fold up and they'll protect the terminal bud. So it creates like a barrier around the bud. But the other thing is longleaf, it's very susceptible to a fungus called brown spot needle blight that we detected in, I believe, 1938. And with fire, you burn off any spores and all parts of that fungus, and it prevents it. So it's adapted to have that, I guess, to reduce the competition and to reduce brown spot needle blight. And it adapted to just be able to grow rapidly with fire because of that.
Interesting.
Yeah. So it's a weird one. It spends 5 years, so up to 5 years, sometimes longer, in what we call the grass phase. So when you put it in the ground, it looks just like a little plug of grass. And you burn it, and nothing ever happens. And then all of a sudden, the next year, they've shot up and they're this tall. So they have strong root development early on in the early burning phases, and then you get just a period of rapid growth because you have all the root stores. Yes, ma'am.
In the slide that you showed the size of the tree, if you burn every year, every 3 years and every 13 years, the trees were much larger if you burn every 13 years. And that seems like it would be healthier trees. And
Did I have a slide that said?
Well, yeah, there's a picture, but you never
Let me see.
Yeah.
there it is. Burned every year, burned every 3 years. And that confused me because it seems like the trees are healthier if you burn less frequently,
Let's see.
according to this slide.
Let me think. Yeah, you're probably right. Yeah, that's an oversight. I didn't even know that picture was there. I just like stole that from somewhere. Thought it was a cool picture. Let me try to think about this scientifically for a second and see if I can come up with an answer. I'm probably just going to tell you I don't know what it is. So
it just confused me.
It says unburned for 13 years,
Right.
unburned, and the other ones are burned and
Burned every year, burned every 3 years, and
other
then
context to explain the picture.
yeah, there's not. No, honestly, I put it up there
Got that too. I'm like,
because I'm wondering. Yeah, there could be.
let's do it, but nobody did it.
Yeah, no. I thought it was just a nice, like, old looking picture scanned out of a book. I don't know the context on that whatsoever. So that very well could be different age classes or something too. I don't know. So I'm just gonna tell you, I just like saw, I was, oh, that's a cool looking picture. Let me drag that.
well, I feel better that I'm not the only.
Yeah, no, I didn't know what you were talking about. I was like, man, I never said that. So I don't know. For me, in my experience with longleaf, that graph is not, or that picture is not representative of it.
Okay.
If I see it go unburned, it stagnates. And so I don't know. That could have been. I mean, I think that was from the 30s or something where I pulled that from. But
Okay.
so that could have been something very early on that was later proven false. There's so many different factors with longleaf, and soil is one of your biggest ones. So like those trees could have easily been on bad soil types or something too. I don't know. Just yeah, you caught me. I just was like, man, that's cool. But, and we'll get into some, right at an hour. Okay, cool. I think we're closer to the end. So basic ecology now. And so I've got to put this up here. We talked extensively about the altered ecology of our forested ecosystem. And here's the driving factors. Number one, money. And there's a lot of other things, but money, and while it's a necessary thing, it's the root of our problem. Money was the reason that we cut down the piney woods. Money was the reason that we haven't put it back into what it used to be. Exclusively money. Now, the good news is that we do have the ability to somewhat recreate these historic ecosystems. We don't necessarily have the ability to restore it exactly to what it would have been. The seed banks are different, the plant compositions are different, but we can somewhat mimic what we've gotten. But it comes with cost and it comes with the burden of time. And so a lot of areas like the Jones, like the Siki, like some of our state forests, where cost is not a prohibitive factor, we can do it. And national forests will always have some of these historic ecosystems. On private land, I look at it. I've got 320 acres. I can't afford to manage it. I don't have the time to manage it, and I can't afford to pay somebody to put it into what it would have historically been, and so there's that burden. And one thing, and this goes directly with money. So land ownership categories in Texas, and this is why money, the necessary, but a root of many evils. Land ownership categories. If you look, there's only about 7% of public land in Texas, 5%. I mean, it depends on the figure, but 95+% or 90+% of land in Texas is owned privately. We are a private land right state. The Texas Forest Service does not have any, I don't remember what you call it. There's an official term, but we're a non-governing agency. We exist for education and outreach. Now, we can write you a ticket for burn ban violations and stuff like that, but that's state governing. We're a non-regulatory agency, so even best management practices and things, they're voluntary. Everything in the forest sector is voluntary, and now we do it right on our forest, or we try. But we don't control what happens on 90% of the land in the state of Texas. Our goal is to educate and assist and hopefully help. We have cost share money, so somebody can apply. I'm not eligible for it, but somebody else can apply, and we can pay to have it burned. Have your property burned, or we can pay to get it mulched or whatever. We have programs that we do for this private land, but there's just a really significant lack of participation in general.
What percent you will, in your expertise of landowners participate in the program?
So I would say active management. I would say landowners that are actively managing their property. I work with about 200 a year. I would say less than 5 out of 200 a year that are actively managing. The other 195, I do 200 tax plans. So in Texas, you get a tax break if your property's under commercial forestry. 99% don't actually qualify, but we still, you still get it. I would say probably only 5 that out of that, if that, out of the 200 that I do every year are actually participating.
What does it take to qualify for commercial timberland?
10 acres. So you have to have 10 acres of forest land. And you have to, this is where most don't qualify, is you have to have the intent to produce income. So I wish there was a change, but it's scary to change state law because it could easily, that tax break is like significant. So it changes, you instead of being taxed on market value, which down here, I don't even know what, probably over $100,000 an acre. And it changes it to the timber value, which is about $300 an acre. So you're paying 2% on $300 instead of 2% on 100,000. Pretty big difference. Yes.
So essentially, most farms and ranches here has that enactment, commercial forestry and exempt taxes and whatnot.
Well, so on, yeah, most if you own more than 10 acres and it's in forestry, I would say most of them are under a timber appraisal. If anybody in here does and you're not, you need to come talk to me because I can save you a bunch of money on taxes. And farming and ranching, now farming and ranching is very different too. So they're actually doing so in there's so many different layers to the forestry one. So 10 acres, it's not worth a logger's time to move equipment onto 10 acres. It costs them $5,000 just to move their equipment to cut. And then it costs $20 an acre to operate their equipment, to cut the trees down and to bunch it up at the set. And then it costs 20 cents a mile, probably more now, for them to load the truck and to haul it to the mill. For pulpwood, which is the product hardest to get rid of right now, the nearest mill from here is going to be about 100 miles away. So you're already at $40 a ton. And each truck is hauling about 30 tons of timber. So $40 a ton, just to cut, bunch, and haul, each one $30. And when you get to the mill at Evadale, with that, they're only paying like $40 a ton at the gate. So you're at a bare minimum, you probably lost money, but at a bare minimum, the logger's breaking even. So that's an issue.
That was a question.
Yeah.
How many acres would you need to have a sawmill in Texas?
To have a sawmill, probably most of them are on like at least 50. They're pretty big operation because you have to have a lot of retention stuff, but I would say 200 or 300 is I think what most of them are sitting on. But I think the compounds themselves, I don't know. Like we've got Steely Lumber there in Huntsville. They're probably, sitting on like they own a bunch around it. But the mill itself probably sits on about 10 acres of like what they have for actual operations, maybe 20. But I would say probably at a minimum 50 acres to have it. But see so it doesn't make sense. So when you look at mill profits are at all-time high. Timber values are at all-time low. Prices in the store are at all-time high. And so the mills are making more money than ever. And the ultimate problem is, I think, that there's not enough demand to create more mills. It's kind of the same as our seedlings. Because when you look at mill profits, like, dude, I should start a pulpwood mill right here. Like I see what the one in Evadale makes, and it's phenomenal. But there's not enough demand for these products to make it worth investors to start another mill. And so that's really hurt our industry, and it's hurt the land base. So now we have more timber out there than we could possibly even harvest and process at a mill and convert to a product that will be purchased. And that's why like most people don't actually qualify, because it'd be almost impossible to get somebody to cut your timber to make money, and you have to have the intent to produce income. Now for me, just to help somebody on their taxes so they can afford their land, I'm just going to pencil whip it, pretend like they're the biggest forest producer in the entire world, but it doesn't work out. But like to go to your original question, like ranchers, farmers, I mean, they're meeting that exact standard. Timber very rarely meets it, but it's usually not the landowner's fault. In that case, usually it's a market driven situation.
When you log the state forest, what's the pay differential? I mean, does the state make as much as the private owner would be? As far as, or how do you pay that how do you get paid by the timber company for the log?
So I just bid one out yesterday. So I do, Texas Forest Service manages all state property. We also manage a lot for U.S. Forest Service. So they contract me to cut timber on the sand. We do a lot of different stuff. I bid one out on the Sam Houston yesterday, and the bids were what I would expect on private land. They're actually higher than what I would have expected on private land. And so that one, so when I do it for the feds, I give that money to the county and they use it for schools and road improvements. On state forest, I don't know where the money goes. I sold over $1 million worth of timber on behalf of the state, and I've never gotten a penny of it. So I don't know. We get some of it back. Like we bought some equipment for the state forest, but I think a lot of it goes into just the director's general fund. And I'm not sure.
And then you have different price for like first cut with pulpwood, and then
drastically.
Picture where you got lumber.
Yep.
Like that picture in the seat porch, is that eventually going to be logged?
No, on stuff, when we get something like that, we might do like a patch logging on it where we'll cut like 20 acres of that, put it in longleaf, and then let that stuff go for a while until it's pretty good. And then we'll cut 20 more acres and do it, But When I bid it out, I have different products. So you have, in general, pulpwood, which is going to be what's turned into paper. So that's very junky trees or very small trees. You have chip and saw, which is usually they'll cut like a 2x4 out of it and then chip up the outside of it. So that's going to be like 5 inches in diameter up to about 10 inches in diameter. It's got to be very straight. Then you have saw logs, which is what they're going to cut dimensional lumber out of. Then you have poles. So I got for pulpwood, it's our problem to move right now because the nearest mill is 100 miles away. The bid I awarded was $1 a ton. And if they had, and the previous, I was shocked to see $1 a ton because my previous bid was 15 cents a ton of what I had accepted. And they were still losing money on 15 cents a ton. So what I had to do was accept, because I can't give it away as a state. We can't give anybody anything. And so I accepted 15 cents, but then we lowered the price. So like I got a bid for $28 a ton for saw timber. But last time at the 15 cents when the markets were bad, I accepted $11 a ton for saw timber to offset. So me allowing them to, to bid half of what the saw timber was worth, then it allowed them to haul the pulpwood for me. So basically, so you can make your money off this saw timber, you pay me half of what it's worth, but I need you to haul all this pulpwood for me too. So they're losing money here, but I negotiated so that they can make money here.
What is pulpwood?
What's that?
What is pulpwood?
Oh, it's you. I'm sorry. I thought I heard it from back there. So it's all ground. So it's turned into pulp. So it's completely chopped up. And it makes like paper cups, regular paper, cardboard, stuff like that. Yep. And it's our hardest product. So other issues, political restraints for government land. This forest is very restricted. There's areas of this forest that need to be harvested. And I never could. So so a forest in general, I don't want to go over time. I blab. So a forest in general, research shows that you can support 120 square footage of stumpage per acre on an area. So if I cut down every tree at 4.5 feet on a 1 acre block and I measured the area of that stump, I can support up to 120 square feet before we start to see a decline in the growth of those trees in general. And once you get beyond that, your trees stagnate and you're a lot more susceptible to beetle, southern pine beetle, Ix and graver beetle, etc. There's a lot of areas on this forest that are exceeding that, but public perception prevents me from logging it. So logging mimics a natural process. We're going to talk about a lot of natural processes in a minute. So that's a big one. Prescribed burning. We used to burn this whole forest every year. Now I'm not allowed to dump smoke over 1488. And I'm entirely developed all the way around. Every time I do burn, even if we just have a little bit of drift, I get phone calls. We get 911 calls. I've had to go to court. I've had TCEQ investigate me. And that's not fun because you're guilty until proven innocent. Now, luckily, I have sovereign immunity, so they can't do anything to me as long as I'm not negligent. But it's still not fun to be investigated by TCEQ for a complaint that, like I was in protocol, but every time that we do that, we're not able to. So even the red cockaded woodpecker management zones, we used to burn it every year. I could burn this entire side of the forest in an hour. I could do probably 100 acres an hour if I had enough people. And with a good day, I could do 400 or 500 acres an hour. I burned over 120, 150 acres with just 2 or 3 of us, in just a few hours. And now we have to mulch it and we have to mow it. And now we're mulching like 4 acres a day. So if I could use fire, I could get, hundreds of acres a day, but instead I have to mulch or mow and we're just getting, a little bit done. So that's a political restraint that we have just impacting us and just impacting woodpeckers. And the big one, lack of return on investment for all of these, and lack of education. A lot of people just simply don't know. So does anybody know what succession is? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So a lot of this next talk is going to be about succession. So this is our movement and our change over time of what an ecosystem wants to climb at. So somewhere probably in this area, our climax, or what we're not going to receive drastic change without some kind of setback, it's going to be some kind of hardwood ecosystem or some kind of mix of pine and hardwood is our climax. So if you have a pasture grassland and you do nothing to it, you don't mow it, you don't burn it, nothing happens. Eventually it will seed in. It will have early successional species, shade intolerant species like pine. They'll grow up, they'll create shade, a favorable environment for hardwood, and it will climax out at that. So just a general. So, but you have disturbance that changes succession and it sets succession back. So disturbance is just some kind of event that initiates change to an ecosystem. It helps to maintain the ecosystem. So it could be floods, fires, hurricanes, anything that alters an ecosystem in some kind of way. If you have too much of a disturbance, either too intense of a disturbance or too frequent, it can revert an ecosystem back to earlier stages of succession. So if you have that hardwood forest and you have too much fire, you can convert it back to a grassland. If you, or a hurricane or whatever, you can convert it back. If you have too little, if you have the pasture and you don't do anything to it, no disturbance, it's going to convert to that climax hardwood ecosystem. And this is an important note, eventually late stage ecosystems are going to have an ending event. It happens in the chaparral. It happens here in East Texas. We've had some of the worst fires in history in this area, or you go look at Bastrop of what happened there. If you have a late successional climax ecosystem and you have a massive fire, nature's going to take care of itself in that way, especially if we're not taking care of it, then it will solve it. Yes, ma'am.
So do we just have like a tinderbox right here in the middle of the woodlands?
That's correct. If you saw, so gosh, I wouldn't even want to. I will say, 99% of public perception of wildfire is very wrong. 99% of the wildfires that we have we should just let them burn. Your house is not at risk. Like the worst thing you're going to get is a little bit of smoke in there. There's zero risk, and I'm doing more damage taking that bulldozer out there and dropping it, or launching my airplanes in the air and dropping it. I'm doing more harm than that fire's doing good. 99% of the fires are that. And the public perception is very wrong. Smokey Bear, I mentioned, and I've got it again later, very effective marketing campaign. But 99% of the fires are that. The 1% of the fires that aren't would absolutely terrify. If you saw some of the videos that I've got on my phone or seen some of the stuff, they're terrifying. It's like end times type stuff. Of when I remember, gosh, I was 19. This is fun. This is embarrassing too. So I was 19. Y'all remember the Riley Road fire when in Magnolia in 2011? So I just started, and I came. So I was 19 years old. And I went and when I pulled up to that and I see all these houses burning, I see people scrambling, you see animals that are killed, and I'm young, and after that I went home and freaking wrote a will, of my 3 possessions of all right, I'm gonna die doing this, I need to give out. But so that 1% is terrifying, and that 1% is right here. I've seen it. We had the game preserve fire in Huntsville in 2023. In 15 years of doing this, I had seen, I'd been to Riley Road, which is the worst fire that we've ever had in this area. I'd been to the Bering fire. I'd been to, to a bunch of really big extreme fires. I'd been to Bastrop. I had never seen a fire do what the game preserve fire in Huntsville did that year. It was just very, very intense, very, very scary. But those are the events that set back this early or late stage succession, where you have some type of event, whether it's a hurricane, a tornado, or a massive wildfire, that 1% of wildfires that completely reverts an ecosystem, and everything is incinerated or knocked over, and it's back to grassland. Yes, ma'am.
So how do you calculate the balance of that? Is there like a formula or a general rule of thumb? And then with that, do you account for natural occurrences impacting the work that you're doing as well?
So the balance is in prescribed fire?
Yes.
You mean, yep. So 2 to 3 years for burning is our annual. So, and I think I have this in here somewhere. The general rule for fire. So we've discussed extensively that fire is a natural part of an ecosystem, and it's what we've removed from an ecosystem. So don't take this literally, recognize the concept of it. For every year that you've removed natural fire from an ecosystem, it takes that many years of annual fire to return that ecosystem to what it historically would have been. Don't take that literally. It doesn't mean this hasn't been burned in 50 years. You got to burn it 50 times. But it's that's the concept of it. That fire is not a one-time fix-all. This is a project. This is something that you have to continue doing. So for me, if I have something that hasn't been burned for a long time, I might burn it 3 years in a row, and that will drastically impact it and change it. And then I might burn it 2 to 3 years after that. So really, you have to weigh your options on that. But there's other things like if you mulch it first, you can immediately get the underbrush out at least, and then you have to, you can do some more burning and stuff, make it a little easier to burn. But there's a lot of combination how to go about it. So here's, I think I've mentioned all of these. I'm bad about getting ahead of myself, but tornadoes, floods, hurricanes, drought, disease, wildfire. I've got a slide in here. So we're, as a species in general, we're really bad at like, we look at these and they're horrible. Don't get me wrong. I've lost 2 houses in my life due to a hurricane, and it's horrible. But like, when you look at it from a like Mother Earth perspective, they're just natural events. This is just initiating succession of an ecosystem. This is starting succession over. This is creating, taking a climax ecosystem and creating diversity within an ecosystem. So if you look at it from the perspective of the Earth, it's not as bad. It's the impact to us that makes it worse. I put that slide in there. Smoky Bear again. All kinds. So now here's our common fires or causes of fires in Texas. Debris burning. Number 1, somebody lights something off in their pasture and then leaves and goes to lunch and they don't do anything and it gets out. Power lines are a big one with all the wind we've had lately. A limb will fall on a power line and spark. I've had a lot of animals, like a buzzard will get on a power line and spread its wings and touch the other line and it'll cause a spark. And so you get some weird ones. Lightning's a pretty big one too. But so just a few examples. So flooding. All right. So in areas that are in floodplains and creek bottoms, hardwood bottoms, flooding is probably their primary form of disturbance. So fire is going to be in your uplands. But here, San Jacinto River bottom, Trinity River bottom, flooding is going to be what sets back succession most of the time. A lot of times you can't even get a fire to burn in these areas, even in pretty extreme drought conditions. If you get into something like that, the fire's going to drastically calm down. Hurricanes. This was actually from my house. When I didn't want to show y'all my house, but I lost. So we evacuated. My daughter's crib was completely crushed by a tree that night. So yeah, it was terrible. But luckily we weren't there. But So that's a succession starting event. I still had a lot of trees there, but that's a good bit of them. So there's other thing, drought. And you look at it, it's horrible. But like from an ecosystem, it can also restart something. So you get a drought, you have a heavily forested area. We have the Its engraver beetle. It preys on weakened pine trees. It's going to pick 10 or 20 trees in the area, and it's going to create an opening. And that opening creates diversity within an ecosystem. There's just so many ways to look at it. Now, if those 10 trees are in your yard, I deal with it all the time. My phone rings off the hook for it. You're mad. I lost 8 trees last year to them. I hated it, But like in a natural ecosystem setting, it's beneficial of how you look at it. Other things, mud rocks, snow slides, or mudslides, snowstorms, just any kind of natural occurring event that can affect an ecosystem. I'll tell you, snowstorms. So we had that winter storm, the Blitz or something like that a few years ago. I'd been here about 10 years at that point. I had only seen ambrosia beetle once or twice in those 10 years. I saw 6 cases that year. After that, so within 1 month of that snowstorm, I saw 6 cases of ambrosia beetle that I'd never seen. I'd seen 2 in the previous 10. That caused some kind of event. I don't know, I don't know what it was, but that's some kind of succession altering event just from that. So I love this slide. That was the first AI generated image I've ever done. I made it like 2 days ago. But so when we think about this as a species, so what humans are just we're a very tiny part of the history of the Earth, not even a measurable of the history of the earth, and we rule the earth now. And there's been other species that have ruled the earth prior to us, and they had their ending event. And we're here until our ending event. And so when I look at it objectively, we spend a lot of time trying to recreate in natural resources what our world used to be. But then when you look at it, like we're the dominant species, like we were put here to do this. And so we're part of that evolution. So like I look at it the same as we managed for red cockaded woodpecker, because it was a prevalent species, but we have the same impact, that we do on the earth. And this is what we're doing now, is what we were designed to do as a species, whether it's good or bad. In our opinion, that's what we were designed to do. And when it's not good, then we'll be ending. But to just add a little humor is I think about, so we're recreating stuff from a long time ago. The species that will succeed us one day will recreate what we do, right? And they're going to be, oh man, I've had a Dollar General right here, like a Whataburger on that corner. And I don't know. I just thought that was funny to think of. Like, we're recreating other people, and like someday they might replicate what we tried to do, So this is the intermediate species disturbance hypothesis. I think it's pretty accurate, where it states that the greatest level of species diversity is found at intermediate levels of disturbance. So if you have an area that does not it's not burned frequently, there's not a lot of flooding, no hurricanes, tornadoes, whatever. So very minimal disturbance, you're not going to have a great diversity of species. You're going to have species that tolerate that. If you have an area that burns every year, that has hurricanes every year, tornadoes every year, you're not going to have a great diversity. You're going to have species that can tolerate that. Now, when you're in the middle, when you have areas that are intermittently burned, intermittently have hurricanes, tornadoes, floods, you're going to have species that can tolerate fire. You're going to have species that can tolerate wind. You're going to have species that can tolerate water. You're going to have a wide mix of species. And so, and I mentioned this very early in the succession talk, is all ecosystems take part in natural successions. Pasture, will eventually convert. Sometimes it converts to a tallow thicket instead of a nice like oak mix, but over time, they're all going to create a favorable environment for what's next, and then it's going to have its ending event at some point. And all ecosystems are going to move up and down that succession scale and have the ending event. Examples: Bastrop wildfire, hurricanes, things like that. These really, really bad things are just a creation of succession, or of new succession. And I put this, there's no textbook answer on what an ecosystem is supposed to look like, because we just don't know. We have historical records, and those historical records can't, possibly paint the picture of everything that we have. So history textbooks describe East Texas as that, what we saw earlier, mature timber wagon, you could drive a wagon through, no understory. And that's somewhat correct. We had that, but it was more of a mosaic. I think I might have got all right, there we go. It was more of a mosaic. So because of all of these different events, we didn't just have 4.5 million acres of of longleaf pine ecosystem that you could drive through. Because that fire that was started might have burned for a little bit, and then it might have gotten rain. The lightning storm that started the fire might have rained 5 minutes later, or it might have rained 5 weeks later, and it burned a bigger area. But there was no control to it. So you had natural creeks and rivers that you're going to have hardwood. Hardwood in East Texas or in the piney woods does not burn very well at all. Even in extreme fires, it doesn't burn. And so you have that patchwork. And then as you escape out, you have, what area burns. So it was very, very patchy and mosaic compared to just that, textbook, what the textbook says of, you could drive a wagon all the way through. I want to make sure that I didn't look. So yeah, we're good there. And so on this, can we return to normal? And I immediately put, unfortunately, no, and maybe I'm negative. But I don't know. I think there's a lot of driving factors. I think we can't recreate the seed bank. I think there's probably species that were here that we don't even know about. And I think that the private land base is probably not willing to invest the time or effort or money to be able to do that. And one thing that we have to realize is these ecosystems were created over thousands of years. And we're here just for a little part of that. So longleaf pine, for example, when I was in Kirbyville, the southern part of that district is what we would call the flatwoods. It was very flat, held a lot of water. Longleaf pine was prevalent in the flatwoods, and back all the way up to the timber baron boom in the 1900s. Very prevalent species in the flatwoods. We cannot get longleaf to grow in the flatwoods now, and what it is because longleaf established there over thousands of years, over periods of 10-year, 20-year drought, where those flatwoods dried up enough for it to be able to establish, and then it could tolerate it. So now, just mimicking it in my 15 years or whatever, we're not able to do it. So that's part of it too, is some of these things just happened over such a long period of time with so many different weather patterns and weather events that it, we can't recreate thousands of years in just a few years, And so how do we manage ecosystems now? So we've got about 12 million acres of timberland in Texas, 92%. I said 95% earlier, a lot of different figures on that. It's private, and timber ranks third in agricultural value in the state of Texas, which is pretty phenomenal when you look at what actually is timber production area in the state of Texas. It's maybe a 10th of the state, or 5th of the state at least. 91,000 jobs with over $2.3 billion in payouts, and we're the number one the forest industry is the number one employer in East Texas. And so we have applied forest ecology is the official term, but we have a rotation that we do. So you have preparing the site, replanting the site, treating things, and then doing some kind of harvesting to the trees to mimic that. And then at that point, you have two different options of you can harvest and start over. That's going to be the industrial side, which is necessary. It is necessary. Or you could have the approach of like what we have here on the Jones or some of the other forests where you have areas that you maintain as this like historic climax ecosystem. And so I just started on the edge of that cycle. Site preparation, you can do it with heavy equipment. You can do it with chemicals. You can do it with fire, which is the cheapest and the easiest. But when you plant recently cut over or damaged area, you have to do something to prepare the site for planting. Trees do not do very well with competition. Yes, sir.
So if you do the fire route, wouldn't that actually mess up the soil too?
No, soil is such a good insulator. It will get the very top of it if it's an extreme fire. Most of the time it's not. So a lot of stuff, especially when you get something real grassy, like some of those forests that I showed earlier. When you burn that, within 2 weeks of burning it, you can't even tell that it's been burned. It just regenerates that quickly after a rain. So on a low intensity fire, it does nothing to the soil. On a very high intensity fire, it will sterilize temporarily the top inch or two. But that once you put the tree in the ground, I mean your roots are already about like that. You're already below that level of sterilization. And so we like on our fires that did sterilize the ground, I've seen zero. Actually, I see better survival on those because there's no competition around them.
So essentially, when you're about to do like a fire regrowth or whatever, always check the weather, please.
Yes, yeah, fire and weather are very, very important. So on site prep burns, actually, what I try to do is I try to burn it in the middle of the summer. And normally when you do prescribed fire, you're burning in the winter, the spring, maybe the fall. And you don't want it to get above about 80 degrees. You start seeing more tree death right there at 80 degrees if you're above that. In the summer, I want it hot and ideally pretty low in humidity. And I want as much consumption as possible. And I want the sun baking down on that so I can consume as much of that debris and all of that as possible out there. So that's a site prep burning is a little different because you're trying to kill everything. And even if you sterilize the top, quarter of an inch, half inch of soil, it'll be better, very quickly. But your tree roots immediately go below that. So all kinds of ways to do site prep, tree planting. We do hand planting. and machine planting. So there's actually, yeah, you can see, I don't know how well you can see, there's a guy that rides in that machine. It's got two packers and he's just dropping trees down and that wheel is rolling and putting them in the ground. So that's a, real fast and easy way. You can see it just drops, makes a furrow and puts it in. Mostly if it's less than, a couple hundred acres, less than a couple hundred acres, probably you're going to hand plant. Machine planting is what you do on bigger jobs or if you just want to pay a little extra. If the machine is set right, you have better survival on machine planting usually because you don't have any human error. But it's not always set right. If it's set wrong, then you have like zero survival. So here's just some examples. So here's the seedlings that you can get today from the nurseries. Site prep, generally like prescribed burning is going to cost about $40 an acre to burn it if you were to contract it. Herbicide is about $100 an acre. Tree planting, it's about, depending on the year, about $70 to $100 to contract a crew and about $50 an acre to buy the seedlings to plant. So we're talking, what is that? So let's say you burn, that's $40 an acre. You do your fire breaks, that's going to be probably, depending, maybe a 500 to 1,000. That's a one-time cost though that you maintain. So let's just say burning $40 an acre, seedlings $50 an acre, so we're at $90. Hiring a tree planter $70 an acre, so that's $160. You're at a minimum, $160 an acre. And if you have to do heavy mechanical, if it's not harvested right, if it's severely damaged, you have tornado blowdown, something like that, you could easily be up close to $1,000 an acre to replant. So that's some of the hiccups that are on there.
So if I'm talking about owning 3 ranches, 800 acres, 600 acres, and 4,000 acres, and we looking at those prices. That's
It's substantial. Yeah. And so that's part of the problem. So we have cost share programs that offset it. So burning costs about $40 an acre. If you come to me, I can pay you $30 an acre to do it. Tree planting cost, to hire a contractor, $40 an acre. Well, I can pay about 80% of it. So our programs pay for about 80% of the cost of that. So it helps. It offsets it a lot. But with that, most of the time in the forest industry, when you're replanting, you've harvested prior to planting. And a final harvest cut on timber, usually you're going to make about $1,000 an acre in that final harvest cut. And so if I clear cut, I'll have $1,000 an acre. I'm going to set aside 400 or 500 of it to do my reforestation, and then you put the other 500 in the bank or wherever. So that's part of it too. Now, if you have the ranch and you're starting from scratch, that's what you're dealing with, man. And that's why people don't do it. Now we have that cost share program, but ideally you will have owned the land with timber and already made the money from the harvest that you can use to put forth. Yes.
I'm curious about the soil health when it's disturbed like that. Has the university or your outfit done any comparative studies of the soil composition, including fungus, beneficial fungus and bacteria compared to right after some of this disturbance and prep before planting?
If we have, I'm not aware of them. I will say I put machine planting it happens very minimally. I would say vast majority of the tracks are going to be hand planted, which is very minimal disturbance. With the site prep, I have never done mechanical site prep in 15 years. I don't believe in it. I will do chemical site prep because it's so cheap and it's so effective. Most of the chemicals that we spray are inactive in the soil within about 30 days of it. Now there's still the ethical dilemmas of that. I understand it, but I don't believe in mechanical site prep. I do. I think you're probably onto something on that. So I don't personally do mechanical. I try to do fire. It's natural. It's to me, it's the best method. If I don't chemical, I will say it does. There is a part of me that believes it has its place in restoring an ecosystem because of how quickly it can do it, where you achieve a total kill of a plant, of an undesirable plant in particularly. Whereas fire, I just top kill everything. I get root resprout. So chemical has its place, but if I have my choice, I'm only going to use fire. I think you're probably on that. I don't know if there's a study or anything. I know there's a lot of chemicals that have been active in the soil for, up to 6 months that are no longer used in forestry. Yes, ma'am.
I would imagine that with the fire, you're adding carbon to the soil, essentially, right? With all the ashes and everything that's burned.
Yep.
And I did a research project back in college and about commercial farming versus the organic method and or conventional, whatever. And one of the things that I found in the research was that if you increase the amount of carbon in the soil, it actually increases the ability of the soil to hold on to other essential nutrients.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Yeah, cool. I was like, oh, nice.
Yeah, that's cool. And so when you look at timber harvesting, it's one thing, and there's a very bad perception on timber harvesting a lot of times, but you have to look at it. For me, I look at it as a way to mimic natural processes. It mimics what a fire would have naturally done. If it burned through an ecosystem, we're going to lose some trees in that fire. If a hurricane comes in, you're going to lose some trees. If you have these clear cuts, like that's a tornado. That's where a tornado touches down and goes. We tried in the state of Texas. It's not recommended to clear cut anything greater than 100 acres. And I would say 95% of the state complies with that. Now, like I said, we're non-regulatory. But that's our recommendation. 95% of the state complies with that. We don't typically have large clear cuts anymore. But when you do, it's not necessarily a bad thing. We're restarting succession and we're having that break in an ecosystem. And so you have to look at. I didn't put that there. So thinnings as a way to mimic this process, but also we talked about the 120 square foot of basal area earlier and how that's what a forest can sustain. Well, when you have a pine plantation and you plant those trees early on, you put a lot in the ground so that they can survive. One, because some of them are going to die. And so then you have to have a well-stocked stand and they have to train each other. So they're going to grow up. And if a tree is left in a pasture to its own, it has nothing around it, it's going to branch out. It's not going to fight gravity if it doesn't have to. But when you have a lot of trees stacked together, say 600 trees per acre, they're not going to be able to grow outward because there's a tree right next to them. So they're going to have to fight gravity and they're going to grow up. And that's what's going to create our tall, spindly trees that are good for lumber, very minimal branch development. But because of that, when they're 15 to 20 years old, you have a dog hair thick stand because you've got a lot of trees there. And that's where your beetles and stuff come in. And so when you do a thinning, you're creating space. So you're reducing that basal area, getting it to where we have less competition so they can grow. And you're also creating airflow within the forest that disperses insect pheromones. Southern pine beetle, sends out an attack pheromone and brings in more. The Ipsen graver beetle, a pheromone brings in more. So a lot of insect management is also going to be pheromone reduction too, but we're creating that opening and reducing competition for the trees. And so, there's all kinds of products that come out of the forest, and there's things in like ice cream, that you don't even think about, not just the box, but like cellulose. And there's, almost every product that we have is touched by the forest industry in some kind of way. And so we had talked about fire. I don't even know why I put that slide in. We've talked about it pretty extensively, but that's another way that we manage ecosystems to mimic that natural process that would have happened 200 years ago. So that's it for me. I see Donna Work is here, but I'll take questions. But like 5 minutes for questions if we have any. Otherwise, we'll do a quick break.
I have a question.
Chris,
I have a lot of questions.
okay, that's fine. We're here.
Do you have examples of common like pests or diseases, like pictures for pines that we can look out for in our like neighborhoods and whatnot? Like fungus problems, beetle problems. Do you have any examples of that?
Yes. Can I borrow this flat? Could I put them on my computer and maybe you could send them out? So I have like all kinds. So it's like what I would call a forest health information sheet of all kinds of insects that I could put on this flash drive and we could and they could send them out. So common ones, Ipsen graver beetle, in communities. I see it all the time. I don't worry about it. My phone rings off the hook for it. But I don't worry about it. It's a natural insect. I look at it as it's putting a pine tree that's on its last stage out of its misery. They're not the bad insects that you hear about that are wiping out thousands of acres. That was the southern pine beetle. We run a trapping program for it every year. We haven't caught any in a long time. We haven't had an outbreak of them since the 1990s. And it's not currently a concern for us. So Ips and pine tree, Ips and graver beetle is going to be the most common one. I see. Are there any certified arborists in here? Okay, good. If you lied to me now, so all right, I'll tell you, you get the truth then. So I've seen there's a lot of diseases, particularly with fungal stuff, like a spot anthracnose or some bacterial stuff that are just going to go away on their own. If you have a wet spring, particularly, you'll get a lot of anthracnose. And when it just dries up, it'll go away. In the summer it'll be gone. But I've seen there's a lot of individuals that kind of take advantage of the fear. People are always afraid for their trees, and it's taken advantage of. And like, I can fix it with this $3,000 injection, and it will. I mean, it'll fix it within a couple days, But if you waited just a couple months, then it would have done it too. So we have very few treatable diseases here. So to me, like hypoxylin canker, that's probably the biggest one that I see. You'll have gray patches. So it's 3 phases. You'll have an orange patch, a gray patch on the tree. It takes over the bark, and then a black patch in the final stage. I see it a lot. Everybody thinks it's oak wilt. It's not, but it's not treatable. If it's able, so I look at hypoxylin as it's like staph. So if you cultured every tissue of my body, you're going to find that the staph bacteria. Hypoxylin is the same thing. If I go culture every tree out there, I'm going to find it. I'm going to find the spores of hypoxylin canker, but only under certain conditions, stress, drought, is it going to become toxic to that tree and be able to establish. So here in East Texas, I would say Ips is my #1 phone call. I do get a lot of stuff for anthracnose, some leaf scourge, and a lot of it's just drought. I mean, so one thing to think about here is our weather the last 5 years has been just insane. We had the winter storm Uri in 2021. In 2022, we had almost a year-long drought. We set record temperatures that year in 2022, and in July of 2022 is the hottest it had ever been in Huntsville and Conroe, Texas. In 2023, we broke that record. And we had another record drought, and we had the hottest temperatures that we've ever had. Our trees grow for a long time and they die for a long time. So our trees are still recovering from the drought in 2010, 2011. And, they bounce back, and then we get hit with a blizzard that they're not used to. And we get hit with 2 years of drought that we're not used to. And when you look at it, this is my opinion. I don't know the science behind it, but I've witnessed it. Is the piney woods we talked earlier, they go all the way to the Atlantic Ocean. We're on the western edge. You get a few miles west of where we're at right now, and they stop. And then you have desert and plains. And it's my opinion that you're going to experience the greatest amount of change on the western or on the fringes of ecosystems. So where you have that transition from the piney woods to the Great Plains, I saw more tree death west of Huntsville in 2022 and 2023 after drought than I had seen. I was on a drought survey crew after the 2011 drought, and we went out and I saw more tree death from those 2 years of drought in 22 and 23. And I think it's because we're on the western fringe. I've seen it a lot more here. And so the reason I say that is to answer your question. Most of everything that we experience here is related to drought and the snowstorm in recent years. And long term, it's going to be drought. And usually anything that happens after that, Ips and graver beetle, hypoxylin canker, etc., is going to be a result of that. And whatever ultimately kills that tree is just putting it out of its misery.
What is the solution? What we can do about it?
I don't think there's anything.
We have 2.5 acres, and just on our small little plot of land, we've lost a significant amount of trees over the last few years. We've lost pretty much all of our pine trees. I think probably because of the drought.
Yes.
I had a big oak, one of my biggest oak trees I lost to disease. I lost one that was knocked down during barrel. I lost one that was struck by lightning. I lost pretty much all of my huge oak trees.
Yeah.
It's makes me sad.
Yeah, no, I agree. I've seen more tree death in the last 2 or 3 years than I had seen in the previous 12, 13. You know, it's been pretty insane. But there's
You will get to see more of what you were asking about. How do we identify? When Ashley Morgan Olvera comes and does invasive species, she'll talk and have a lot of pictures demonstrating from an invasive species standpoint what to look for and what to do about it. So, but if you would put that, we'll get his information.
yeah. Where I put is my computer over there still? I'll do as soon as I'm done. I'll put those on there and give to you.
Okay.
I'll just leave that here for y'all. So
Thank you.
So private managers calling about trees.
oh, all the time. Yep.
I do have
That's
another-
most of my 98, 99% of my job. Well, 50% of it's fire. So I oversee wildfire operations for Region 4. So from Huntsville to about Victoria, is all falls under me. And so, but then the other 50% is private landowner assistance. So that's homeowners for single tree, thousands of acres for commercial forestry and everything in between.
Do you have arborists? Do you recommend leaving me again?
So as a representative of the state, I can't recommend somebody. I can provide a list, you know.
Can't use you to.
Yeah, I'm an arborist. I'm a certified arborist. Yeah, but yeah, I would recommend. So for me, before I hired an arborist, I would call me.
Okay.
Now, there's been plenty of times where I've recommended, like, hey, you should get an arborist, especially when you have like cabling and bracing and stuff that you need to do. But like I said, I mean, I've seen like $5,000 spent for a disease that would have gone away on its own in 3 months, Then I've seen it with, I saw somebody spend $45,000 last year and they injected every tree on their property for Ips and graver beetle. And like, they probably would have just lost like 1 or 2 trees if they hadn't done anything. So like, so to me, like there's not a dang tree worth $45,000 ever, Like but that's just me. I guess to them it was worth it. But I feel like if I was there to educate them, I would have told them like, hey, look, you might lose like maybe 3 of these, and they're all little too. They're all like little bitty. They probably needed to lose some anyways, And but they spent $45,000 then. So yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ben, so much. We had a little. Okay.
Thank you.
Do a quick introduction of Donna. Donna needs no introduction, but I'll do it. First off, she graduated from A&M.
Well, good. I'm glad to hear that.
With a bachelor's of science degree in wildlife science. She's worked with the A&M Forest Service in Lufkin since 1990s. Got a lot of experience here. Starting off with pest control section, working in bark beetle and other forest and insect pest research. So she's got some background in some of the stuff you were just learning. She currently works for the Water Resources Project, which if you go back to one of our very first classes, Sam Hill, who did the taxonomy for us, part of that same organization. She is also the Forest Legacy Coordinator for Texas. I would be interested to hear what that is. She serves on the A&M Forest Service Agency Recruitment Committee and represents TFS on the Texas Black Bear Alliance. Ooh, that sounds like another presentation needs to be announced. So I will let Donna take over.
Okay.
Presentation's ready to go.
Well, thanks for the intro, and before I forget, I'll just say a little bit about Forest Legacy. I've been doing that since 2023. My supervisor said, here, I'm giving you this program, and I've heard of it, and I knew people who worked in it before, but I didn't know anything about it. And so I'm learning as I go. And in my first meeting about Forest Legacy, I figured out it's all about real estate. I don't know much about real estate, so I'm trying to get trained up in that. But it is a U.S. Forest Service program, but the state's enacted. And basically, they're trying to keep working forests working. And this is nationwide. And but also some of the U.S. territories like Puerto Rico and some of the others are also involved in it. And we look for environmentally important lands that are in forest, at least 75% forested, but are in danger of being sold, subdivided, and land conversion being done with development of some sort. And in Texas here, we have 7 projects. Some of them are in the Longleaf Ridge area in southeast Texas. I've got one that's a wetlands up in Smith County, and a lot of them do have longleaf pine and water features and things like that. So basically what we do is we get a conservation easement on them. Some of the states will actually buy properties outright, but we didn't want to do that in Texas. We have enough land to take care of, but we do buy basically the development rights on the properties if it's approved, and the landowner can still own it. They can still do forest management. In fact, we want them to. They can sell it, whatever, but it's in perpetuity, and the new landowner has to follow the conservation easement agreement that we come up with, and this has to follow whatever we say they can or can't do in that. And it's really, really interesting. And I get to go visit each property every year because I have to monitor those sort of things, although it's highly competitive. So Texas, we think Texas is beautiful and great and has all this neat stuff, but we're competing with Montana and Maine and Utah and properties that are right next to Zion National Park and stuff like that. So it's really competitive, but we've been fortunate to get some projects in line. So it's really interesting, and I'm still learning. So, okay, but I'm going to talk about the red cockaded woodpecker. This is another part of my I work with the water resources. Since I'm in East Texas, I do a lot of the training of loggers. In fact, yesterday I had loggers all day where I had this in class session, and then we were out in the field. And so we talked to them about the forestry best management practices, and probably Ben did mention that in his. I think the way he talked, I think he probably mentioned it some. So he mentioned best management practice. So I talked to them about that sort of thing. The red cockaded woodpecker I've been working with since '96, when the person who was working with them retired, and I was the one that had the wildlife degree. They said, "Donna, you want this?" I said, "Yes." I've been working with 6-legged wildlife, the insects. And I said, "Well, this is real wildlife." So I've been doing this for quite a while. Let me see if this sound is going to work. Oh, it didn't work. Okay. That sound. Anyway, hopefully we'll hear birds today. I cannot guarantee. We're getting close to nesting season. Around here, they start laying eggs about middle of April. And so we're getting close to nesting season, but usually this time of day, they're going to be off on the forest foraging, looking for food, and they're not around where the trees are. But we'll take a hike around, and hopefully we'll see and hear some. And if not, I got an alternative, so we'll see. Okay, it is a small woodpecker, about the size of a bluebird or cardinal. And as you can see, it looks similar to some of the other woodpeckers that we have. And some of the others that look similar to it, I'll describe the red cockaded here in a little bit, but we have the downy woodpecker there on the right and the hairy woodpecker right there. They look similar, but you can see there's some differences, like the red cockaded woodpecker there is a species called ladderback woodpecker. This isn't that same species, but it's in that genre because looks like it's got stripes along there. It's actually little dots that go all the way across the back, and it doesn't do that on these two. The quickest way to tell the difference is the cheek patch, and I'll show that better in a little bit. And there's a black stripe that goes across the cheek patch of the downy and the hairy. The hairy is larger, the downy is smaller. So at your homes and to your feeders and things like that, you probably have the downy or the hairy, but probably not the red cockaded woodpecker.
And the downy has the white stripe and the hairy has the black and the cockaded has none.
Right. Well, they both have in a minute you'll see a better picture of the white cheek patch on the red cockaded woodpecker.
I mean on the wing.
Oh, on the wings. Okay. Okay, on the back. Yeah.
On the back.
Yeah, the wings are black, and then there's the white feathers in between. They have those there. This one is speckled all the way across.
I always find my downy or hairy patch on the back.
Right. See the patch of white on the back. This one doesn't have it because it's speckled all the way across.
Okay. Roughly, what is the size difference between the hairy and the downy?
I don't have the numbers with me, but it's not a whole lot. Especially the downy is a little smaller than this. The hairy is a little bit bigger. I can't give you numbers. There are numbers, but I can't think of them right now. I don't pay attention to that. but
Similar.
yeah.
The downy is so small.
Yeah, the Downey's really small. There's a for sure difference in between those and the hairy two, isn't it? Especially when you compare those two. There are numbers, but I don't have them with here. Okay, so here again, you can see the total, the speckling all the way across the back there. And just like all woodpeckers, they have stiff tail feathers. Why are those stiff tail feathers there?
To balance on the tree.
Right. They balance on the tree, and those stiff tail feathers, if you're on the side of the tree, if it was a normal bird, it'd probably be doing this, but those stiff tail feathers are helping to hold it up on the tree. And in other photos, hopefully you'll see the feet. A lot of birds will have like 3 toes out here, and maybe if they have another one, it's back here. The woodpeckers have 2 here and 2 back here for the same reason. They're usually on the side of a tree or on a limb or something like that, and that helps to keep them where they need to be. There you can see the cheek patch a lot better right there, the solid white cheek patch. Right there. And the males and females look pretty much alike.
No.
Okay, because I could actually, I'll do this so I'm not leaning over. So I can see what picture's up. I could do this in my sleep, but I still sit down. But they look very similar, but the male and the male only has a patch of red feathers back here. As you can see here, the red is really hard to see in the field because sometimes their black feathers will cover it up. Sometimes I've seen a male, I said, I know that one's a male because I could tell how it was banded and things like that, but it still looks black. So I always excited to get a picture when the red is showing there. This is over in the cockade area, they call it. It's kind of like an old military term, like a feather in the cap. And military cap was in the cockade area was back here, and that's where they'd have the feathers. So that's why it's called that. But again, hard to see unless the bird is irritated. Like I know it is here. I know it is there. It's really irritating. But they're irritated or he's scratching and the sun hits it just right, then you can kind of see it. So it's really hard to see. And when somebody calls me and tells me, I see the red cockaded woodpecker all the time. I said, did you see red eye? She said, yeah. And I said, well, I know I usually know right away they didn't, but that really tells me, no, they didn't quite see it. And again, the male and female is similar. This is a juvenile male. That means it was hatched the year this picture was taken. And when the birds get their first feathers in, it's the red on the males only the male chicks will be on top of the head. Then when they molt about September, October and lose their young feathers, they get their adult feathers in, then the red's no longer here. It's on the back of the eye. I put this in here just out of interest because I came across this one time when I gave a talk to Audubon Society in College Station one time. I said, well, I'll find some Audubon stuff. So I found this. I already gave away the artist here, but I'm sure you all know anyway, John James Audubon. And this is a picture that he drew of the red cockaded woodpeckers. And so I read the story about it. And it's pretty interesting. I'll probably need to read it. It said this species, which was first described by Wilson, is found abundantly from Texas to New Jersey and inland as far as Tennessee. Of course, that's not the new range anymore, but they were abundant back then. This was 1850s, 40s or 50s. Near Bayou Sarah in Louisiana, I once slightly wounded 2 males, which I put in my hatch in order to carry them home. The first, on being brought to the ground, was easily secured, but the case was different with the other, for it at once hopped off towards the nearest tree, crying loudly all the while, and on reaching it, ascended it as if unhurt. However, I obtained it by accidentally knocking it off the bark with a clod of dirt. It defended itself and pecked my fingers with so much vigor, and I felt that. I know what that's like. And I was obliged to let it drop several times out of my hand. So if I did that, I would be under the jail right now with a then endangered species, now threatened species. But I just thought that was interesting. And somebody enlightened me. Of course, that's how he took them home and took pictures. And somebody enlightened me that, well, how do you think he got all these good sketches and drawings of the birds? They were captive and sometimes they weren't alive. So that's the truth of it. But I just thought that was pretty interesting about what all he did with that. And here I'm holding my breath if I'm holding a little baby chick in my hand so it didn't drop. This is the historic range of the bird. If you've got one of my handouts, I hope there's enough for everybody. These are old documents. There may be some old terminology in it, but the facts are still the same. And we're going to be moving from our office, and I had a stack of these. I've had them for decades. I said, I'm going to get rid of these. So I figured y'all would enjoy them because there's pictures of cavity trees in there. But that map is on there. That's the historic range of what Audubon was talking about up there to Jersey. And so quite a wide range of the birds. This is the historic range, the current range of the red cockaded woodpeckers. If you take out that little patch there in Kentucky, and maybe part of Tennessee, but they're in Kentucky. So it's those polygons, they don't inhabit the entire of those polygons there, but those are the general areas where they do occur in these states across the South. Oh, the story about the Kentucky ones, I forget what year it was, but it's probably in the 90s, I think. And there were red cockaded woodpeckers there. However, they just had a small amount of pine forest there, and some kind of bark beetle came and killed all the pine trees. So these guys use only live pine trees. But fortunately, they were captured and taken somewhere down south. I don't know where they took them, but they were moved there. And since then, there hasn't been any red cockaded woodpeckers up there. This is the historic range in East Texas, which is all over East Texas. This is the more current range, although this map needs to be updated as well. We don't think there's any in Polk County. It depends on if there's still family on the Indian reservation or not, and I haven't heard lately if it is. And we don't think there's any more in Nacogdoches County. The Nacogdoches County ones, one of the old timber companies in Newton County, they have a large area where they have most of the red cockaded woodpeckers, but they had some outliers here and there. Well, they decided, but consulting with Texas A&M Forest Service and Parks and Wildlife, they consulted with us and Fish and Wildlife Service. We all decided it was best biologically for those birds to get moved in areas where there was a larger group, because just one family group up here, there's no exchange of genetic material or anything like that. There's harder for them to survive. And so we agreed that would be biologically sound to move those from that place, capture them there, put them in the population that you have thousands of acres where they can live. And we're very glad we did that, because maybe a month or two later, a tornado came through and just destroyed the area. So we're glad. It's the last ones in Nacogdoches County that we know of. And this is a type of habitat that they are adapted to live in. Large, mature, old pine forests that are open like this. You see the guy walking through there. Some people would say I could gallop a horse through there and not get knocked off the horse. So this is, and it was longleaf pine. Back then we had tens of thousands of acres of longleaf pine along here across the South. So this is what they're adapted to live in. And now there's not near as much longleaf pine, although there are efforts to restore longleaf pine. And a lot of landowners are replanting it, but they can use loblolly pine. That's what they use here. They can use shortleaf pine. They can use other pines in other states that they have the most of. So it doesn't have to be longleaf. And a lot of people think they only are in longleaf. That's not true. They can use the other pines as well. So nowadays, like most endangered species or threatened species, they became that way because loss of habitat. So in the late 1800s and early 1900s, the settlers coming across the South from the East and coming across the South, they were cutting a lot of the trees. They were building their ranches. They were building their houses, their corrals, their barns. They were clearing land for gardens to live. And that's before, there's plenty out there. And that's before they realized that, hey, after a while, they started realizing that, hey, if we don't do something about this, we're not going to have this resource anymore. It is a renewable natural resource, but you do have to renew it. So this is a picture in, I think that's East Texas, of that devastation. But about the 1930s, they started realizing what was going on, started replanting. And now the forests that we see nowadays, almost probably 95% of the forests we see nowadays are a few generations away from that. So getting the whatever was left behind, that's what the woodpeckers had until the other trees got mature enough for them to build into. But this is what we call it a cluster. And I'll kind of point that out to you out in the field. A cluster is the area where the woodpeckers have their cavity trees that they roost in at night. They're the only woodpecker that we have in North America that builds their cavities in live pine trees. Other woodpeckers are going to use dead trees, or they're going to take over the cavities of the red cockaded woodpecker. But they're the ones that build it in live pine trees. And so the cluster is a grouping of trees that they're currently using or have used in the past, or it may be some artificial cavities have been put into there, and I'll talk more about that in a minute. It can take them a year or 2 or 3 or more to build one of these. So they're pecking their beaks against that. They'll get through the bark and get to the wood, and one beak of sawdust at a time, pulling that out. So that's why it takes so long. It's a very important resource to them. And when they lose them to a storm or something, then that's something that needs to be taken care of. But we think they can sense somehow when a tree has a disease called red heart rot. And that is a fungus that gets into the heartwood of the tree. And sometimes it manifests itself on the side of the tree as a cone. It's like a little mushroom there. And that tells us, well, it's inside this pine tree, and it occurs in large mature pine trees. And it doesn't necessarily kill them itself, but it softens the heartwood there, makes it a little, I mean, it's not soft like that, but it makes it more porous. You can see the air cells in there. But if you're pecking your beak against the wood and trying to excavate a cavity, you want all the help you can get. So this helps. So the mature trees have the size, and they often have the red heart rot, and that's the ones they choose to build their cavities in. And this is called a start hole, where they've, sometimes you'll see a wound on the tree and maybe a limb from another tree fell on it, or a bulldozer hit it or something like that, and then the sap will flow. Well, this is a perfectly round circle, about 2 inches in diameter, real smooth. And that tells me that's a red cockaded woodpecker start hole. They're starting to build a cavity. And after they complete the cavity, then again, you've got that 2 inches there. Then they start pecking resin wells. The little sap is flowing through those resin wells. They peck through the bark, get to the sap layer, and it flows down kind of like melted candle wax. And that's really indicative of their trees, a really telltale sign of those trees when you know what you're looking for.
Why do they dig the well?
Oh, the resin wells are there because and they work on them every day. Even when they have good sap flow, they work on them every day so it doesn't get hard. They want it to stay sticky. For one thing, it is a protection against their major predator, the rat snake. And rat snakes can, I've seen videos of them going up like brick walls and things like that, but they can climb up the rough furrowed bark of a pine tree, and they'll get in there and kill the eggs and the young. And so that's their major predator. But if they get up there and there's a good sticky sap layer flowing down there, that irritates their belly scales, and they back on off the tree or fall off the tree. So it protects them from that. It also acts as a good banner. Maybe I'll have a better. Acts like a good banner, because when there's a lot of sap, if there's some flowing every day and some of it hardens, there's a lot of sap there, and you can see it from a distance, and sometimes it'll look kind of whitish. So another bird, they're very territorial. So another non-family member flying by, and they say, oh, there's a cavity tree. Ooh, no, somebody's living here. So it's kind of like a banner saying, hey, this is our territory. And also with that little bitty 2-inch hole, a black hole there, if there's a hawk, somebody chasing them through the forest, and you have the sap around here, that helps them to see that. That's kind of my idea anyway. That helps them to see that and get into the tree as well. But works as a banner, works as a marker to help them get into the cavity quickly, but mainly as a deterrent for the rat snake. So that's one advantage of building in live pine trees. Because once a tree dies, I've seen them, the tree they've been using and it died, I've seen them live in it a few months, but once that sap stops flowing and they don't have that protection, they're out of there, they leave. So that's just a closer look of that. And you can see where they've picked away the bark. When you look at the outer bark of a pine tree, it's grayish pretty much, except for partially brown. When they peck away, or if we cut away at that bark, it's going to look kind of reddish brown. And when I see that reddish brown bark and the fresh sap flowing, that tells me the birds are actively using that tree. That means they're pecking on the resin wells, using it every day, and the reddish brown has not faded to gray yet. That's just another close up. I was climbing up in the tree. I said, well, this would be a good shot that I could take from the entrance cavity. So, yeah. Yeah, it does. It does. I noticed that too. And this is what it looks like inside. I also brought a real one of these that's out in my truck. I'm going to show you later before our field trip. But this is what it looks like inside. There's a family group is going to each have their own cavity. And so it's not very big. So it's probably about 3 inches or so inside, goes down about 6, maybe 8 inches at times, 2-inch entry hole. So that's enough really for one bird. So they each have their own cavity. So everybody's going to have a cavity like this. So that's what a natural cavity looks like on the inside. They don't use nesting material. They don't bring in leaves or feathers or anything else like that. If I use my peeper scope, which I'm sorry, I forgot to charge the battery for it today. It's not here. But if I have a peeper scope, which you'll see pictures of it here, and look inside, if there's feathers and leaves and stuff in there, say, ooh, something else is using this. The red cockadeds aren't using it. They will sometimes peck away on the edges of the cavity and get some little pieces of wood. So they have little wood chips or something down there for a bed, but that's it. They rough it.
Here there was a squirrel size and
Right. Squirrels. Yeah, squirrels are another problem in these cavities. And I will have a picture of that too. This is an artificial cavity back in 90, I believe, along the East Coast. Hurricane Hugo came through and destroyed, in the Carolinas, it destroyed a lot of red cockaded woodpecker habitat there. And fortunately, somebody had been working on these artificial cavities. Oh, he doesn't have that here. I've got one in my truck. They usually have one here where you can open up to see it. But it's basically a cedar block, and then they drill a hole down this way and a hole that way to mimic. It's similar in configuration to the natural cavity inside. And then they put plywood on top of that to cover up the hole that they used with the drills. And the PVC pipe they've been doing it several years now, but it's a more recent addition to that, because even though you put one of these in a tree, pileated woodpeckers and the red-bellied woodpeckers, they like to take over a cavity, but they need a bigger hole. So they peck around there and make it bigger. And then the red cockadeds won't use it anymore. So that's why we have that there. And we also have the wire mesh on there, because that keeps the other woodpeckers from cutting away here. The pileated still find a way, because I'll see these in a tree, but down in the corner outside of that mesh, they dig a big holes. Okay, and that's what that looks like inside. And those are installed by someone with a short barred chainsaw. They have to have a permit to do that. Of course, they have to have training to do it. And someone with a short barred chainsaw will go up there, cut a rectangle out of the tree. And once they have all that out of there, they have the box, and they've put putty around it to seal everything off so sap doesn't get inside that cavity. Slide it into the tree flush. And that's what it looks like once the artificial cavity is inside the tree. And then they doctor it up. They'll put some of that putty on the front of it, then spray some spray paint on it, make it look natural and brown. And then they take paint or putty, and you see the streaks on the right-hand side, those streaks on the tree. Why did he paint it that way? That's right, exactly. They're imitating that sap, and so it catches somebody's eye to say, oh, that's a cavity there, and they can check it out. Of course, once they move in, they have to peck the resin wells to get the protection of the real sap. But that's an eye opener for them. And I've learned over the years of watching these contractors that do this, everybody has their own artistic way. So they may put a little squiggle of the paint at the bottom here or something. But when you look at that, if you know who built it, you say, oh yeah, that's the handiwork of Kevin right there, something like that. We band, you'll see the green painted bands here. U.S. Forest Service used to use green, but now they use white. But we still use the kooky kind of green looking color. But we also have a metal tag on there with a stamped number on it. So we have all our trees numbered. I need to catch up. I've got some here that need numbers. But so I have a catalog of the trees and their size and things like that, and when they're active and when they're not. This just shows that this is a red cockaded woodpecker tree. Whether they're using it now or not, it may or may not be. But be careful with this tree. And again, to get this type of habitat, this is the type of habitat they like, with the large mature trees, nice and open. You don't want a very tall mid-story. That's the vegetation, the shrubs and things that come up underneath. If it gets like 7 feet high or above, and sometimes it can get way up there, the woodpeckers aren't going to use it. They don't feel safe. They're predators. The snakes can go from, okay, here's a sweet gum tree here. I can bypass that sap layer and get in there. And it's also not an easy flyway if they're being followed by a hawk. They want to be able to fly through it real easily without running into brush. So you don't want the brush to get up too high. This shows, this is a pine tree. You see the sap on there. It was a cavity tree, but it was killed by bark beetles. But after bark beetles, whether it's the ips and neighbor beetles or southern pine beetles, which we haven't seen in ages, and the ips often don't kill the trees. But this tree died, and it may have been something else. And if a tree gets hit by lightning, usually the lightning doesn't kill it, it's the beetles that come in afterwards. So there's a wide variety of beetles that do come into a dead tree like this after something else kills it. But that's a buffet for these birds. So you see that big grub, like this bird has been doing. In fact, those big holes there, that's the monogamous, the pine sawyer beetle that will come in after something else, either lightning or bark beetles have killed the tree. It'll come in after something else. And those are exit holes after the young, but they lay eggs underneath the bark, and then they get their larvae are there when the larvae in the pupate, and then they come out as adults. That's the exit hole for them coming out. So it tells me that's what's in there. And that big grub that he's got that looks like a monogamous good fishing bait, big grub there, that's some food for them. So they can eat that. They can come bring it to the little ones as well. And when they go off foraging for food during the mornings, they're going to peck first on the resin wells, get the sap flowing fresh each day, and then they all meet up together as a family group and go off foraging on the forest. And they're looking for insects, insect larvae, flake away bark and find ants and centipedes and stuff like that. A little bit of berries in the diet. And this is one that's feeding a little one. And that picture was taken here on this forest, and it was a pretty mature nestling. And if it can reach that high, or if it can climb up that high to get the food, that tells me it probably was fledging in a few days. And so it was neat that once you have little ones in there, the whole family group takes turns coming to feed them. This is the peeper scope, and this is how during nesting season I can look into the cavities and see what's in there. And basically it's a surveyor's pole, a 50-foot telescoping pole. It's very hard to handle when you're at 50 foot. It's impossible to handle when you're at 50 foot, but about 42 is about the best I can do, because the taller it gets, the thinner it gets, and it's doing this. And so to get that into the cavity tree, it takes a while and get it right on and know when to put it into the tree. But and I've done it 50 feet before, but I had to get the ladders and climb up there and actually physically stick it in there. But and the lady on the ground, it's more than 50 feet. Lady on the ground had to pick it up. So mostly we're dealing with about 40 feet or so anyway. And it's got a probe on the end of it, which has a camera and 2 lights. And I've got a monitor down here on the ground. And when I've got the probe inside the tree and I turn on the lights and the camera, then I can see on my monitor what's in the cavity. Is there anything in the cavity? Are there eggs in the cavity? Are there flying squirrels in the cavity? If there are flying squirrels, that they're also another major problem with these woodpeckers. And then I have ways to snatch them out of there and move them somewhere else. So that helps me to see what's in there, because in the old days, before I had this camera, the old way was climb up there, get a little drop light. You have the little the battery down here, and a drop light put in there, and a tool like a mechanic or a dentist used to see in their little mirror, and stick that in there and look in there. So it took a lot of time and effort and hard to do. So this is a good time savings tool right there. So here's some pictures of what's in the cavity. Is there a glare on that for y'all? Can y'all see the pictures okay? Okay, it's glaring for me on the side, so I'm just making sure it wasn't for y'all. If we need to turn off lights, we can. But there's some eggs in there. The female lays her eggs in the male's cavity tree. It's usually the newest, cleanest, freshest tree, best resin producing, so it's safe. And so she will lay the eggs in the male's cavity tree, one egg a day until she's through laying. So I've seen a nesting of 1 egg, 2 eggs, usually 3, probably an average of 3, sometimes 4. I've seen 5, but not all of them hatch. But I have seen 4 eggs laid, 4 chicks hatch, and 4 chicks fledge. But average, I would say about 3. So she lays her eggs in there 1 a day until she's done. And when she is done laying, then that's when the incubation starts. So then somebody's going to be on those eggs 24/7. And so since it's the male's cavity tree, guess who has to sit on the eggs on night? And but during the day, they will take turns, and the female will come in and sit on them for a while. They hopefully have helper birds. It's a healthy family group would have a breeding male, a breeding female, and a helper bird or 2. And those helper birds are always male offspring of previous year's hatches. So they stay behind because the females don't stay behind because there's not a job for her to do if there's already a female there. So they go off and they try to find their own mate somewhere else. But those males that stay behind, they're helper birds. They help to defend the territory. They help to feed the young when there's young in here. They help to sit on the eggs and incubate the eggs. And then if something happens to dad and he dies, then they can take off the top breeding spot, get their own female, not their mom, but get their own female and keep the family line growing. So dad has to sit on the eggs. And this picture I caught, sometimes, usually the birds flush. If I get up there and I'm going to peeper in there, usually they flush out if they're in there. And sometimes they don't. And when I do that, I just make them think, if their major predator is a snake and the probe on the end of the camera is black and like this coming in there, they probably think, is that a snake or whatever? I've had some come up there and peck that camera or whatever. But anyway, they get really upset. So I get it out as soon as I can. But this was a good, you could see the photo of the egg right there and someone in the nest there with it. And I call this the shift change. I don't know if there's anybody here that remembers Debbie Lair, but she took this photo. She was a Heartwood master naturalist, a big birder, helped me all the time, and a great photographer. She's no longer with us, but I think this is a once in a lifetime shot. And call it shift change because to me, in the time of year it was taken, one bird is flying out and the other one's coming in to take over incubation duties. So I thought it's pretty cool. And there's yellow on that. I think it has to do with the lighting. The birds don't have yellow on them, but I think it has to do with the lighting. So that's a cool picture. And this is, yeah, there's the eggs are starting to hatch. Oh yeah, I forget I can look here. The eggs are starting to hatch. And of course, they don't have any feathers when they come out. And after they lay the eggs, after they start incubating, in 10 to 12 days is when the eggs will hatch. And around here, that usually starts in the middle of April on and can run into May. And you can see there's another one coming out of the egg on the left. And there's a buccal sac when the chicks go to the bathroom. It's conveniently wrapped in a little sack that the female or any of the other birds will take that and throw it out and keep the nest clean. So that's nice and handy. Better than a diaper. And of course, everybody in the family, they're going to go off foraging in the morning after they pick their resin wheels in the morning. They all kind of get together as a family group and fly off foraging, but they're going to get food for themselves, but they're going to also get some for the young. So usually about every 15 minutes, they're coming back and bringing something to the young. There's a chick right there. This one was a lone chick. I think the nest started off with 2 eggs, but this ended up being just the only chick that survived. And probably about 8 days old there. And this one, here's another one where you can see the bird peeking out right there. And it's old enough I can't peep her at this point. I can only peep her if they're less than 21 days old, I think it is. And because beyond that, they're feathered. And if they get scared and they come out and haven't flown yet, they can hit the ground. So I usually don't see them when they're this big. I can see them with the spot on the head because that comes in earlier. But when I see them like this and they can peek out, that tells me, oh, they're going to fledge pretty soon. Can you tell the gender of this one?
Boy.
It's a boy, yeah, because the red spot on top of the head. So that was a great picture to get that. Debbie got that one too. I was with her when she did that. And there's someone there feeding. You know, like kids, I'm hungry, feed me now. The way I band the little ones, I capture them. I have the Swedish climbing ladders, which I have them out here as just an example for you to see. I have a climbing harness and a belt, and I put those, they're 10-foot sections. I put those ladders against the tree, and there's a bracket on the end of it and a chain on it, so I can do that. I've got my belt around the tree, and I climb up, and when I get to where the bracket is and the chain, I'll sling the chain around the tree and chain it to the tree. As I get up to the next section, somebody hands me a ladder and I stick that on top and keep going until I get to the top. A lot of the artificial cavities that have been put in lately are usually at 22 feet. So I love that. It's easy to get up and down. 30 feet, I can do really good. I've done a lot of 40 feet and some 50 feet. I've done 60 feet one time. That was on this forest, and I'll never do it again. And I haven't done it again. In fact, the tree was so big, my belt wasn't big enough. And I had to, oh darn, my belt won't fit. I'm gonna have to go borrow a belt. So the next day I had to go borrow a belt, come back and do it with 2 belts and climb up the tree, and it was hard. It was hard.
They have a pretty wide range of how high they'll.
Right, and some of that is a factor of how high that mid-story is. If it's, they build higher if that mid-story is up high. That's why we like it. One reason we like to keep it down. But, so 22 feet, they're okay with. It's still safe for them too. It's easy for us to get to. But a lot of times they will build 30 feet if the mid-story is fine, and 40 feet. But when you get to the 50 and 60 feet range, it's usually because the mid-story is high. Although I've got an exception. The best looking stand that we have here on the forest on the south side, they, last year or so, they built some new trees, and both of them are 50+ trees. And leaning like this. I've done leaning trees before, but not as bad as these are, and not at 68. So I said, I'm not climbing those. No, and I'm training someone else to climb. And I said, I'm not sending a newbie up those trees. And I feel better though, because I was talking to the U.S. Forest Service people, and I said, man, I didn't band this year because of the new trees. I know they nested because I could hear the little ones, but the trees are 50+. One of them's almost 60 feet and is leaning like this. He said, oh no, we don't do those. So I said, phew, I feel better. So I'm not the only wimp. And so anyway, I climb up there. I didn't finish that. I climb up there. I will get out of my truck also and show you the noose. But once I get up there, I already know the chicks are there. And I already know they're the right age to band. We can band them between 5 and 10 days old. I like to do them at 6 or 7 days old because their legs are a little longer and the bands fit better. If you wait till 9 or 10 around here, their eyes are already open. And if their eyes are open, they can dodge my noose. So I have my noose that I forgot to bring in, but I've got it in my truck, that I climb up there. And when I first get to the tree, I put my hand over that hole. And even if we close our eyes right now, if we do this, we can tell there's a shadow there. So when I do that, these birds' eyes are closed. But if I do that in front of that hole, what do you think the baby birds think?
It's time to eat.
It's time to eat. Mom or brother or dad's there. And so what they do, they stick their heads up and start cheep, 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 feed me, feed me. So that's when I drop my noose down in there. It's got 3 loops on it, some surgical tubing. And I drop that in there. And I hit bottom, and I slowly pull back and hopefully grab one by the neck and keep fishing until I get them all. And then I put them in a soft bag, lower that to the ground, and do the banding. So you can see, if you look closely, you can see the chick there, its legs are sticking up like this. This is the point I'm holding my breath. And so I'm holding the chick and I'm taking the little noose off of it, and I put it in my little soft bag, and again, keep going to get the others out if there's more. Yep, there is. And once I have it in the soft bag, I have it tied to a rope, and I lower that to the ground. And someone on the ground is holding the bag for me and keeping them in the shade and things like that. And then I go down, I have banding pliers and the aluminum Fish and Wildlife Service, or now they're USGS bands that have the number on them, just like duck bands, but of course much smaller. And I put those on their legs with my pliers, and I have to make sure their toes are out of the way. I don't know if I'll have time to show the banding video or not, but and then I also put auxiliary bands on them. There's colored bands. Those silver bands, yeah, they have the numbers on them and everything, can identify them. But if you only have those on them, there's no way you can read those numbers if you look through binoculars and they're up in a tree. So we also band them with some colored plastic bands that we put on, and each will have a different color combination. So that's how we can identify them in the field. So there's some little ones that have been banded, and then after they're banded, I put them in my bag. I climb up the tree. Yes.
Automatically, those are girls because there's no.
No, because they're not old enough to have to tell yet. They aren't old enough to tell yet. But probably in let's see if they fledge at 26 days old. They probably start getting that on top 19 or 20 days old. Yeah.
The bands are gonna grow with the bird, or the leg doesn't get bigger, or?
Oh, I'm glad you asked that. The legs don't get bigger. They maybe get a little longer. They do get a little longer, but they don't get wider. So when I band them, and this is the accepted time to band them, or you can band them as adults. But once the bands are on there, then they're there for life. So the legs may get a little longer, but not broader. So they're good to go. And when I'm done, I put them in the bag, climb up, and then I pull the bag up when I'm all the way up there, and I put them back in, and they're just like little gummy bears. I put them in there, and I have to push them a little bit to get them to tumble down into to the bottom there. The adults are squawking at me, fussing at me, but they're not dive bombing me, so it's thankfully it's not bald eagles. So they're doing that. Yeah. And then once I get my ladders off the tree, then the adults start coming back and forth and start feeding them again. A thumbs up, a mission accomplished. I guess that's what that is. And then the other birds start coming back. You can tell this one right here is one of those artificial cavities that's been put into the tree, and how natural it looks. They've been using it a long time because they've pecked away the bark for that sap layer. They've pecked away what we call a plate to where actually the bark is showing. So that means they've used it for quite a while. And so those are very handy tools. That's what helped to keep the woodpeckers in the Carolinas going after they put in those artificial cavities that people had already been experimenting with, and they had those to put into the trees out there. So they already had ready-made ones. Flying squirrels are a problem. They, of course, they're cavity dwellers. They do their thing at night, but in the day they have to have a place to go. And they're soft and cute and fuzzy, neat animals, but they can get in there and crush and kill it and eat the eggs. They can kill the young, that sort of thing. And they can just take over a cavity. If it's an active cavity the woodpeckers have been using, I will go and extract them. If it's an old tree that the woodpeckers aren't using anymore, I just let them have it. But I think I've got, yeah. So this is what it looks like through that peeper scope. If I look and I see a flying squirrel in there, that's what it looks like, with eyes and tails. And usually it's multiples, 2, 3, 4, 5 in there. And unfortunately, the season I'm doing this, that's not when they're having babies. So when I take them out, I don't have babies to take out. But the old way of getting them out was these it has a little spring on it and a plunger on it, and it opens up a little grapple hook like this, like mechanics will use to get nuts and bolts out of an engine or something like that. I have that, have a can of starter fluid, like for a diesel, something like ether, and I climb up there, and I know they're up there, and then I have I had a wire. I don't have pictures of that here, but look, a little wire tube that I can stick in that hole and hold my breath first, and then spray the ether a little bit, squirt, squirt. And ideally that makes them, it irritates them. They come out and get in my little trap, and I stick a comb behind it. And then I put them in my little carrying cage that I have like that up there. So that was the old way of doing it. And I was 50-50. I'll get half the squirrels and half of them get away from me. And it's a whole lot of trouble. And sometimes if they don't come out right away, if I keep squirting, I knock them out. And then I have to wait till they wake up or pull them out that way. So, and I'm the whole time I'm making sure I don't inhale it. But then I was listening to, so we always meet every year with the states around us. So Oklahoma, Arkansas, and Louisiana also have woodpeckers, and we always meet together once a year. And when the Arkansas guy said, we have backpack vacuum cleaners, like they use on airlines or in hotels or something. It's electric. You have to plug it in, but it's a backpack right here. And we suck the squirrels out. And so that's great. So I went online and looked, and they were like $500. I said, I can't ask our associate director for $500 to suck squirrels out of a tree. That's when the Heartwood chapter stepped in and bought one for me. Yeah. So they bought one for me that we use for that. And ideally, and most of the time when I do use that, you'll have to have a generator there. So I've got a crew down there that has the generator on a 4-wheeler or something to plug it in. And I climb up there, and I had to kind of modify the tube, the hose to it to fit down in there. And so when I get up there, and ideally and usually what happens is the vacuum cleaner, I get a squirrel and it's kind of stuck on the side, and I keep the suction going. I pull it out. I've got my gloved hand. I've got my little cage ready down here, and I will turn off the suction and grab the squirrel and put it in the cage. So I have a better record of capturing. Some squirrels still get out, but most of the time I have a better record with that. But the first time I used it, I practiced in our office, and I had one of these artificial cavities there, and I put a little medicine bottle in there. So I was practicing getting out. How's this going to work? So I practiced. I said, okay, I feel confident, but I'm going to kind of do it in secret the first time, so I don't know what's going to happen. So when I got to the forest, I told the forester here, I said, I need somebody to help me with the ladders and all that stuff, and I'm going to suck the squirrels out. And he said, oh yeah, well, there's someone's personal wildlife here and they want to watch that. And there's some national naturalists here, they want to watch that. So, okay. So I went up the tree. And so the first time, boom, perfect. I got the squirrel on the side, pull it out. Yay, 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 yay. And then there's another one. There's actually a video. If you go online to YouTube, find W.G. Jones State Forest and squirrel vacuum or something like that. Ken Cram, he moved to California, but he was a great amateur and semi-pro photographer and videographer, and he's made a lot of videos out here. And I should have brought those links. I'll send them to Ms. Kent. I'll send them to her and she can send them out.
Send them to me.
Yeah, okay. And then they were videoing me, and it's in the video where I've got it down there, I've got it turned back on, and then my eyes go like this. And nobody knows it, but I heard and felt that the squirrel went down into the canister. So, but there's no blades. It's not a Vegematic or anything like that. But I went down there and I said, no, the squirrel went down here. I'm going to have to come down and get him out. So I went down there. And we opened it. This was tricky because you open it up and they can get out real easily. You have to have that and the cage here. So he was kind of dazed, but off. So I was able to grab him and put him back in the cage. But that's happened just a few times. It happened in front of everybody, and everybody just understood. They weren't upset because they made me promise not to suck up any babies. I said, well, fortunately, I don't do this during their nesting season. So,
Oh my God.
but
I
that's
stuttered some pretty TikTok squirrels.
yeah. I won't go into it now, but there's stories of where they got away from me the old method, and the squirrel got around behind the tree, and I just had somebody behind me said, I've got one shot. You've got one shot at it. He's right directly behind where your belt is. I said, okay, so I leaned forward, went boom, and got him. And another time I did that once on my boot, but those were the only two times I looked out and got the squirrel that escaped. So, and then I relocate them somewhere else. Not everybody does that. Most people probably dispose of them, but I can't do that. So I just take them. Huntsville State Park is a lot of our squirrels because it's close by and it's got a nice creek there, and I just let them go. Rat snake right here. It's climbing up a tree. This is a posed picture where some of the biologists with U.S. Forest Service put it on a tree, but that's what it would look like going up a woodpecker tree. And that's why it's important to have that sap flowing fresh, because they can get up there and get the chicks. And I have seen one actually going up a tree. Fortunately, it wasn't a tree the woodpeckers were using it, but I saw one going up a tree here on this forest. And I was like half a mile from my truck and said, oh, I don't have a camera. That's before camera phones and all that. And so by the time I get to the truck and come back, he'll be gone. So I'm just going to watch him. So I saw him go up, go in the tree, and he had to kind of turn around and come stick his head out. So but this is a major predator for them. Southern pine beetle here, other bark beetles as well. They attack and kill the tree. The southern pine beetle would mostly, Ips do, the engraver beetles sometimes, but not always, kill the tree. They're attracted to the sap. Of course, all the sappy smell, they're attracted to that, the alpha-pinene and that sap. And they come and they can kill the tree. So after the tree is dead, then it's useless to the woodpeckers. That's the Ips engraver beetles, the little boring dust right there for them. Windstorms back in, I forget the year, 1991 through Lufkin, came through Lufkin where I live, but also through the Sabine National Forest. It really destroyed a lot. It was just straight line winds. It wasn't tornadoes, straight line winds that blew things over here and over in Louisiana, I believe. So you can see the green paint on one of those trees there. That was a cavity tree on the National Forest. And so fortunately, they were already using the artificial inserts. So they went into, actually, this is after 90s. So this had to be 2001. Put in natural artificial cavities in there. And somebody said after this, and there's still some pines nearby that could use. So they put in these artificial cavities. Said after I put in my last artificial cavity for the day, put my chainsaw in the truck, and here came the woodpecker and went right into it. So that's why it's fortunate to have that sort of thing. We've had some put in, and sometimes people say, well, doesn't that kill the tree? It doesn't kill the tree. It's not like we're girdling it, but it does make it a little weaker there. So if there is a high windstorm, that's where they tend to break up there where that cavity is. And we've had some of those here and some at the Fairchild, but look, fortunately, we were able to replace those. Now, to keep this habitat nice and open like this, Ben probably talked to you a little bit about habitat management out here. And to keep it looking nice and open like this, we do have to do management with it. We just can't let it go or it'll grow up like crazy with all the yopon and stuff like that. So one of the things we can do, see, that's a before, there's a picture right there of how it can get out of hand, and that's not bad because it's gotten worse than that. So prescribed fire is important for that, helping to keep that down. On this forest, we do prescribe fire, but we're really limited. You have to do it in small batches because of smoke management. This highway and I-45 being right there. So we still do it here, but it's kind of limited. So sometimes we have to use other methods, but prescribed fire is a good, it's healthy for the forest anyway, whether we had to deal with the brush and the woodpeckers or not. So it's healthy for the forest anyway, and it greens up really quick afterwards. You can see the green up, yeah, it greens up really well afterwards and puts those nutrients in, the nitrogen and the carbon and stuff. Another way is to mulch with these, I call it a glorified brush hog. It's a mulching machine that comes and actually goes over the vegetation and depends on how many passes you make, can really grind it down pretty well. Now, of course, when you do that, you sometimes have to follow up with other measures like herbicide or prescribed burn, because that ticks off things like sweet gums and yopons and things that are sprite right back and come back with a vengeance. But it is one way to get the stems down to where it's not such a fire hazard, but also helps clear it out. So there's an after picture right there. There's a before and an after. And every once in a while we do have used some herbicide spray to help keep that vegetation down. Another good tool are Eagle Scout candidates. So I have Eagle Scouts come out and I don't have to ask them, they ask us. And when they're dealing with an endangered or threatened species, that always gets approved. And it's just habitat work and doing things they like to do, hatchets, bow saws, and the old ones, I'll let them use the axe. But they're part of their job is to get that Eagle Scout designation is to lead a group of scouts, other scouts, to come do a job. And they're always great to work with. Their parents are usually backing them and they're real good, well-mannered kids. And they come in here and Boy Scouts with hatchets and bow saws and things can turn that into this. and they do an area probably around 2 or 3 trees. It's more important right around the trees. There's no way they can do 10 acres or something. That would be a whole cluster area, but they do a good job there. Another great tool are master naturalists. And this was at a time when we were first going to get part of the way we're helping this bird to recover is translocations, and it's been done for several years from here and all across the South, and mainly on U.S. Forest Service lands or from U.S. Forest Service lands where most of the birds live. And that's capturing excess birds from one population, moving them to an unrelated population or pairing them with another unrelated mate and putting them in areas where the population is really declining and needs that enhancement of the gene pool. And so we were accepted to do that. And but we had to have our habitat ready, and this would be like August. And so the master naturalist said, we'll come and help. We already had the artificial cavities in. They came with all those same tools the Boy Scouts use. And I had a sheet of when they're supposed to work. I said, don't work past noon because it's too hot. And they would come out here and do it. And so they got after it and they did a great job of clearing the immediate area to where it's acceptable to go ahead and put the birds in there. When we're doing habitat management for the red cockaded woodpecker, it's not just for one species. Also, the same management that we do for the forest is healthy for the forest itself, but also for other wildlife and plant species, like some rare ones that we don't see too often anymore, the bobwhite quail, Bachman sparrow, Louisiana pine snake, and Texas trailing phlox, which only occurs in 3 counties here in Texas, and other plants that benefit from the same thing. Recovery efforts are moving, that's part of the recovery is moving birds from one population to another, translocation, and how we capture the adult birds they're actually juveniles. We take the juveniles. If I go too long, Mike needs to tell me, okay. And I can talk about this out there. How we catch the juvenile birds, or if we're capturing adults just to band, we wait till they go to roost at night and they go inside the cavity tree. And we wait around, we know which birds we want to get because we've been roosting and seeing who goes where. So before that night, so we go out there before dusk dark, The birds come in before it does dark, we're there a little bit earlier, kind of hiding and waiting. Once they get inside the tree, we wait a while, maybe 20, 30 minutes, let them settle down. They've gone to bed, let them settle down. Then we come out there with 8 or 10 foot long aluminum poles so we can stack one on each other. On the top of it is a wire frame with a mist net on it with real fine threaded nets. And we go up to the tree and then we plop it against the tree, and then somebody else on the ground has a stick or a limb, scratches on the tree and bangs on it like a predator trying to get up there. Ideally, the bird flushes out, gets into that net, and we've captured it. We bring the pole down and take them out of the net. The bloody knuckles there, I believe it because I've done that before, and they've pecked away at knuckles, and they're made to peck against hard trees, wood. And so that really hurts. They're screaming bloody murder. And on this floor, if we were doing it on this floor, we did it one time, not for moving birds out, we've moved them in, but for abandoning adult birds. We did it on this floor before, and there's housing all around us. And here these birds go, woo! And then in the nighttime, it's just, I said, don't tell them what the neighbors think. But if I would take them and then, but if we're capturing them to go to another population, like I've done in Louisiana, then we get them. We put them in a box. We know the location. We know the gender of the bird. We know where it was, when it was banded and what the band colors are, and put it in a box. And if it's male or female, we know that already from the records after banding them. And then we put them all together. We pick a unrelated male and female, and then they get taken off to another forest. And in our case, we're bringing them over here. We've gotten 2 pairs at a time of 3 times here now. And then by the time we capture them in Louisiana, get that all done, it's late at night. The first time we did it, I couldn't tell in that one picture, but I had a broken hand. And I said, oh man, the height of my career, and I can't do it. But one of the contractors was gracious enough to volunteer to do it. Well, he was up in the tree at 3 a.m. So I had to meet the U.S. Forest Service at the Louisiana line, get the birds, and bring them on in here to the Jones. And another group of folks took some up to the Fairchild State Forest with some other biologists were up there. And so in the middle of the night, we're climbing up the tree, and the birds are, I'll show you what it looks like. We already have a cavity ready for them. We put wire mesh on it beforehand after we have a brand new artificial insert in there, so it's nice and clean and fresh for them. Cover it up with something so wasps and other things don't get in it, squirrels or whatever don't get in it. And then when we climb up there, we take off that mesh. We have the new bird that we've just carried for hours, and we stick it in that cavity. Then we have to close it in with the wire mesh, or they would fly out and freak out and probably get eaten by predators. It was all for nothing. But we put the wire mesh back on there and lightly tack it there. We have a string tied to the wire. And then the next morning, then we go to the hotel, get maybe 2 hours sleep and come back because we have to be back before daylight. And then we get there, we're waiting. I have volunteers that are holding the strings, and we don't pull until the woodpeckers start pecking on the screen, the time they would normally get up and want to fly out. And so then I say, okay, pull. And then everybody pulls their string, one for the female, one for the male. And I always have good volunteers for this. And that girl's, the dad let her stay out of school, come do this. But the dad was a great photographer, and he got these photos here after you pull it off. And so hopefully each bird, we try to do it at the same time. So each bird is out at the same time. Hopefully they meet, fall in love, and stay there. That's the idea. That doesn't always happen. And I nearly panicked the first time we did it here, and I'd go back, I gave them a little while to settle down. So I went back about 3 weeks later, look, they're not even using the tree. There's nothing going on here. But those people who do it all the time told me, well, that's pretty common. Sometimes they don't stick where you put them. They shuffle around, they found their own place, and that works out fine. So it's fine. So, because afterwards I found some of the Louisiana birds on the forest, and some have become breeders here on the forest. So we've done it 3 times here. And the current status, the National Forests are the ones who have most of the red cockaded woodpeckers, and their populations have been going up. Every 5 years, the Fish and Wildlife Service does a 5-year review, and they pick multiple species of birds, mammals, plants, mollusks, and all sorts of organisms that have been listed threatened or endangered. They review the science. They see what the populations are doing. They talk with the land managers, and they decide, are we going to leave it here as endangered? Are we going to downlist it to threatened, or if you're doing so well, we can totally take it off the list and delist it. Well, with the red cockaded woodpecker, they decided that the populations were good enough, they had grown enough all across their range, and the land managers were going to manage for them the same way they always did. And so they downlisted it to threatened. So as of November 2024, the red cockaded woodpecker is now threatened, still protected, but just in different ways. And this shows where you can see them here, of course, on all 4 national forests. The closest place here, I know New Waverly used to have an observation place there. I was there a few years ago and they were still woodpeckers there. I don't know if there are now, but they're all over the forest. You can look for the white paint or whatever, or ask the biologist there. And so the national forests are a good place to go. Boykin Springs is picked down on the Angelina National Forest. I take people there because there's one good active cluster and family group there for people to see. And I can also take them to see pitcher plants there. So that's a good place to go on Boykin Springs on the Angelina National Forest. And of course, here we also have, you can see the urbanization around us in this picture with all that development. And so we're kind of like a little island out here in the forest. So it's hard for moving those birds onto this forest is very important because we don't get natural influx. We have before, one from the David Crockett, from the Sam Houston National Forest came over here naturally, but not very much. So it's important to bring that new genetics in and enhance that gene pool. And we also have, and of course we have birders, we have horseback riders, hikers and things like that. And a lot of people come to visit our forest here. And also an ID Fairchild, that's the only other population we have on a state forest is at the ID Fairchild State Forest in between Rusk and Palestine. And I applied for and got them on the when they started these birding loops and things like that. We're on the Texas State Railroad loop. ID Fairchild there, where it's not as urbanized around us, but it's still isolated from other populations. And a lot of farmlands also there. So y'all, as master naturalists, if you're out here, or birders, if you're out here and you're looking, if you have binoculars today, you want to take today, do that. But one thing to look for is if you see one of the birds, and some of y'all have really good binoculars or spotting scopes or cameras, and if you see a bird with bands on it, take a picture and send it to me so I can see the bands and I can check my records for the color combination and tell me about where you saw it on the forest. And that'll help me out a lot. Just seeing band colors, and this one, like the light blue over silver, that tells me that's one of the Louisiana birds there. And if you see a tree that doesn't have the band on it, I'm behind on painting bands too, but most of them at least have some flagging on it, the plastic flag I put around it. But if you see a tree that's nice, natural, round like that, and it has some pecking and sap flowing down, and you think, well, that might be red cockaded woodpecker, let me know, get a latitude, longitude, something on it, and let me know, and I can go check it out. I'll name the tree after you if it is. I've done that before. Oh, there's the end of that probe, so you can see that now. In the booklets right there, you can see pictures of what looks like some people might think are woodpecker cavities, but they're not, or they're enlarged cavities, or they are actually cavities. So you can see some there. So hopefully with all our efforts, we've already got them down to threatened. So hopefully with all our activities, we can continue to grow our populations. Great. Thank you.
Right, we'll hold the questions because I know everybody would rather be outside.
Right.
Than inside. Thank you, Donna. That was great, as always.